Welcome to my channel. Here, I don't just speak, but I invite you to think. Throughout my videos, I've questioned the deepest held beliefs, from philosophy, the dynamics of religion and faith, to personal identity. I ventured into the controversial because I know that only in honest, critical confrontation do we grow. My voice is a search for truth, unafraid of what is difficult. If you join this community today, you don't just watch, but you engage. Together, we open the door to a courageous dialogue, one that transforms us. Subscribe, share, and let's keep questioning, growing, and seeking truth together. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is kind of a last-minute topic that I had to come up with because my scheduled guest just had a baby, and so they're busy doing family stuff, mom resting and all that kind of good stuff. So congratulations to Nathaniel and his family from all of us. I hope everything's good. Glad to hear the baby's healthy. That's very important, of course. But I was thinking about, well, what am I going to do for a show today? And I wanted to talk about something that's extremely important because it's actually something that affects all of us, both directly and indirectly. And that is the justice system. What are we doing with our prison system? Why is it working? And if not, why is it not working? What can we do to improve it? Because improving our justice system makes the world safer, and that improves the quality of life for all people, not just the non-offenders, but for offenders as well, right? So we're going to look into that a little bit, look at some statistics. I will be opening up the panel. This is last minute, and usually I set up a thumbnail or whatever, create the stream ahead of time to give people notice that we're doing a show. So I don't know how many people will show up today, but for those of you that do join us, you're welcome to join the open panel if you'd like to. Before we get into it, a little bit of housekeeping. Just want to thank everybody for supporting this community. We are coming up on 300 subscribers, which is a phenomenal number for what I thought this channel would be doing. I really had very modest expectations. I thought the lifetime of the channel, we would probably get around 25 maybe subscribers or something like that. It would just be a chance for us to kind of get together and maybe chop it up over some issues that we thought were interesting. And in less than a year, in fact, about a half a year, 6 months, we hit 300 subs almost, and over 20,000, 21,000 views on the videos, which is a lot considering I only do this once a week. And I really appreciate all the support that you guys have given to this community. And I appreciate the fact that you recognize that you are part of this community. So I'm really excited about that. We have a big month in June, a lot of stuff coming up. I'll be doing extra shows because of how much I have going on this month. So we'll be really busy. We have the Ark Encounter protest. It's going to be a what do we call it? A fundraiser event happening Saturday with Joe, the Kentucky Atheist. Joe is organizing the guest appearances for that show. I'll be hosting the show, and he's got quite the lineup. A lot of names I'm sure everybody in this community recognizes, like Godless Granny, I believe, is going to be there. Seth Rogen's going to be there. Godless Engineer, Joe, of course, himself. There's a number of other names I'm forgetting right now. Forgive me. I don't have the list in front of me, but I was quite surprised at the lineup. So that's going to be a really fun show. The goal for that show is to raise $1,000. It's the final $1,000 they need to meet all their expenses for this protest. It's the 10-year anniversary. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there's this huge Ark museum that was built in Kentucky. It's supposed to basically indoctrinate children into believing that the earth is only 6,000 years old and there was this global flood. And this guy named Noah put all these animals onto this rickety wooden boat, and they survived this monstrosity for a year. Clearly, that's all mythology based on the Enuma Elish, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit more on Saturday. But this is dangerous, and the reason I'm getting so involved in this is because normally I'm not an activist. I don't get into politics and stuff like this, but this is really dangerous. It's harmful to children to lie to them. It teaches children to not trust science, and it also teaches children that everything that's written in the Bible should be taken literally. Both of those things are extremely harmful to children and dangerous because As they become adults, they start treating people differently because of these religious beliefs. When this gets at voting age, they start voting based on these religious beliefs. And we've seen how much harm that can do, especially to marginalized communities, to women in particular, and to other children. And it's just a cycle that repeats itself. So I am getting actively involved in this protest. I wish I could attend it personally. I just can't get away from work. There's just no way I could do that, unfortunately. So I'm going to do a match up to $500. So if I put in the first 500 and match it, all donations, then we should hit that $1,000 goal pretty easily, I'm hoping. I normally don't ask you guys for money. In fact, I've never asked you for money for myself personally. I don't need your money or want your money. I've got a good job. We're set financially, but this is important. And if you can donate something, even a small amount, every little bit helps. They have needs, like, for one thing, it's extremely hot over there in Kentucky, middle of summer. If you saw the videos from last summer, it was a scorcher, and they're out there in the heat. There's no shade at all. Now they are going to put up some little canopies or tents or whatever they're doing. Bottled water, Gatorades, things like that are definitely needed and appreciated. Travel fees, lodging, all this different stuff. There's some guests that are going to be speaking that require some kind of compensation, at least for their travel and accommodations. So your donations are very much appreciated. All donations, 100% of them do go to the protest itself. There's a link in the description of this video. I've been trying to get that in every video I've been doing since I found out about this protest event. There's a PayPal link you can make the donations to. If you want to reach out to Joe directly, who's the organizer of the event, that's Joe from the Kentucky Atheist. You probably know him. Really popular in the community. Very, very nice and very intelligent young man. Really impressed with Joe. His link is in the description of the video. So that's Saturday. This Saturday, we're doing that fundraiser event. The next Sunday will be the first Sunday of the month, right? And we do our series, Failed Prophecy series. So I've got Johnny B Animations coming by. We're going to be doing, I don't want to give away the topic yet, but I'll release that, put up that thumbnail probably this Wednesday. So that'll be part of that. We're doing failed prophecies because, as we know, Jesus fulfilled exactly 0 messianic prophecies in the Old Testament. And so we're highlighting a lot of these prophecies that Christians claim Jesus fulfilled, and we're showing how he did not fulfill these. And, so far, not a single Christian has come by to try and refute any of that, because we've actually got the scholarship and the evidence behind what we're saying here. After that, this month, I'm trying to put together a show. I believe the date on that is the 14th. We're going to be talking about RTS, which is religious trauma syndrome. This is what happens when people deconstruct from religion. And not every single person goes through the same experience, obviously, but there are it's very common for people to suffer a lot of trauma. When you go from being part of a cult, which is what organized religions are, they are cults, to leaving these cults, your friends, your families, sometimes your jobs, so much of your entire life is built around this. So it's not just freeing your mind from believing things that were not true, but you also have to then deal with the social consequences that affect your life, right? So you go through a lot of trauma, mentally and emotionally. And we're going to have some people coming by and discussing this, talking about their experiences. And my heart goes out to anybody who's had to deconstruct, because it can be an extremely difficult process. As most of you know who watch my channel, I have never been a religious person, so I cannot relate to this personally, but we can all relate to what it means to struggle, what it means to feel like we've been abandoned by people we care about, we thought cared about us. We also know that we've all been wrong, myself included. Every single one of us has been wrong about something that we believed to be true. So we know what it's like to have to remove ourselves, separate ourselves from incorrect thinking and to straighten the path, right? So I'm really excited to do that show. People who are coming by are going to be exposing themselves because they're talking about their trauma. So I expect that we're all going to be very respectful in the comments and supportive of those people. We also have, I believe Tavo is coming by, Professor Tavo Sanabri. We're going to be discussing ethics. As most of you know who watch my channel, I believe in objective morality. Surprisingly, Tavo is an emotivist, so it'll be really interesting. He's going to be the first emotivist I'll have a chance to have a back and forth with about morality. Most people I engage with believe in subjective morality. Emotivism can be considered a type of subjective morality, technically speaking, but it is its own classification, right? Non-cognitivism, emotivism. You have, well, I won't get into it now. We'll save that conversation for later. I feel like I'm missing one more big guest that's coming up. I should have had my calendar open in front of me, but maybe I'll do that right now. Well, we'll get into that later. anyway, this month is going to be packed. So I do appreciate you guys supporting the channel. If any of you want to be a guest speaker and you have a particular topic that you'd like to speak on, please reach out to me. My email address is in the description of the video, as always. That's Objective Ethics YT. That's Objective Ethics Y as in you, T as in tube, at gmail.com. And if you don't want to use that, you could reach, I'm on a number of Discord servers, and you can always leave a comment in any of the videos. I always see that. And I do try to respond to your comments. So we try to keep engaged with everybody. So before I open up the panel, because this is really just an open panel today, I just want to go over some statistics and talk about prison and the justice system. As a lot of you probably know, if you watched my video, Courage Without Fear, or have spoken to me in the past, you may know that I have a criminal background myself. I've been through the justice system and through the prison system. I know what it's like firsthand. So I have a lot of firsthand experience when it comes to this. And what we have right now, we have in America in particular, a real problem. The whole point of the justice system, quote unquote, right, is to make the world, or the country, but in this case, a safer place for everybody. And that's a good thing. We need justice. Justice is actually one of the virtues, right? That golden mean I always talk about, or the middle way that Siddhartha Gautama talked about, the Buddha, right? It's that place between too much and too little. Justice is right in there, and justice is extremely important. Justice requires fairness, and that justice is that place between revenge and unwarranted mercy. Right in that perfect middle, you have justice. And we need justice, but because, for me personally, I don't believe in libertarian free will. However, I do believe that we have agency, because I'm a soft determinist, or some people would say compatibilist. It seems like a lot of our decisions are affected by external causes or influences, but we do have the ability to reason through situations when we apply our mind to it. So we come to this place where in the middle, and so we do have agency, which means we have responsibility. We actually have responsibility to the decisions that we make. But we also need to be sensitive and compassionate, empathetic to the fact that we are a product of our environment, right? People who grow up in poverty are far more likely to commit crimes. This is just a statistic that we know it's a well-known statistic. So that doesn't justify criminal behavior, but it tells us that there's a problem there that we can look at and we can address. People who grow up in abusive households are far more likely to commit certain crimes. People who grow up with parents who use drugs are more likely to commit certain crimes. And so we could even get really into the specifics. People carry this behavior into their adulthood. Our childhood is so formative, right? It's really important for us as adults, and especially as parents, but as all adults, to really be considerate of what children are going through and to take our own responsibility and their development very seriously. Now, as you know, I'm not an anti-natalist, but I do promote having smaller families. I do this specifically because I'm concerned about the effect of overpopulation on the ecosystem. Okay, we have a role to fill in the ecosystem. We evolved naturally, and so we do belong on this planet. However, we have the ability to do what's called terraforming the planet, right? So we actually can change our environment around us, which is a very unique ability that we have as humans with these oversized brains and these opposable thumbs. It gives us a lot of ability to do good things and really terrible, harmful things to the planet and to the other living organisms on the planet. So we need to take all of this very seriously, right? So too many children, too many peoples, too much pollution, too much burden on the ecosystem, the rivers, the clean water, the clean air. So I encourage people to have smaller families. What are we going to do with those children, though, right, that we're bringing into the world? It takes all of us as one society, one global society, one Homo sapiens species to raise all of these children. I have as much responsibility as anybody else to help these children live a good life, even though my wife and I don't actually have children, right? We take that seriously. So we donate our time, we donate our money, we try to set a positive example. We don't, now I don't commit crimes. I've turned my life around. These are the kind of things that we need to do, the behavior that we engage in to make the world a good place for those children to grow up into, right? We need to support the education system. We need to make sure that we have good health care. I really think that all children should receive free healthcare, if not all people should receive free healthcare, but especially children. If we could just start there, let's get all children free healthcare. Doesn't matter. No more financial gates, no more stop gates, no more political issues. Let's just get these kids all the healthcare, which includes mental care, right? Mental health care, as much as physical care. Let's get this to all the children all over the world. Let's make sure all children are clothed, all children have enough food to eat, and all children have a good education. And that's all children over the entire globe. It's when we look at our communities, quote unquote, we are so used to just seeing that what's right in front of our faces, right? But that's when you go to the end of that, the border of that community, well, they have somebody on the other side of them. That border gets extended. And we realize that this community is actually a global community. We need to have a global effort and a global mindset when we think about taking care of each other. So we're going to get into how can we make the world a better place? How can we make it safer? And the justice system plays a huge part in that, the prison system. Let me bring up some statistics here. So I guess I could give you a little bit of background for people. Oh, I think I gotta get rid of this. Oh, that's not the right button. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Oh, I don't know why this. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let me pull this up. Now, just a little bit of background. Excuse me. I was arrested several times. So as a lot of you know, I grew up on the streets. I went through a lot of, I guess you'd call them phases, a lot of growing pains, trying to overcome all that. And I was involved in drugs and alcohol. I did a lot of business with gangs. I worked in the adult industry, and I was ultimately incarcerated, and I was incarcerated multiple times. And this is the problem, the incarceration. Why was I incarcerated so many times? Obviously, my own choices had a lot to do with that, but the environment that I was in, both in prison, the prison system and out of the prison system, right? I went down for drugs and alcohol a couple times, drug trafficking, high-speed police chases, violence, resisting arrest, fighting. So the longest sentence I ended up with was 18 months, and that was I hate to use the word blessing because I don't believe in supernatural things, but it was it was beyond good fortune. It was the mercy of a judge who recognized that I had a very difficult past, and he took that into account when he sentenced me, because I was actually looking at about 72, 75 years for that particular crime. That was related to that high-speed police chase. Eluding in a vehicle is a very foolish thing to do, okay? And I'm not proud of that. I'm not proud of any of the things that I did to get myself locked up. But eluding in a vehicle, when you start driving a vehicle through traffic at 100 miles an hour, you're endangering so many lives. And that's why they tried to stick me with all the 75 years, because they wanted to give me a measure 11 for every police officer that was involved in that chase. And it was not unreasonable for them to try to do that, because I did, in fact, endanger the lives of not only every one of those police officers who had to try and keep up with my dumb ass, but I was endangering the lives of every other citizen that was out and about that day. And very fortunate that I didn't hit anything or kill anybody, run over anybody's dog, whatever it might be, right? And so many horrible things could have happened as a result of my behavior. Very selfish. And I told the judge that, I expected to do every day of that 75 years. But fortunately, I didn't have to. And fortunately, when I was in the joint, I decided to turn my life around, right? But the system wasn't there to support me. That's why I kept going in and out, in and out, in and out, because there was no rehabilitation. It was basically you go in and you meet a bunch of other people, and as long as you can get along with the other prisoners, right, then you actually learn to be a better criminal. And because I had what's called street credit, right, because my crimes were clean, they call it your papers are clean, right? I wasn't messing with children, I wasn't abusing women or anything like that. I was fighting with police officers, running from cops, and slinging drugs and dealing with hookers and hoes. So I had a lot of quote unquote street credit. So I got along with everybody. My time in prison was like a day camp, right? They fed me, they clothed me, they sheltered me, and they let me play basketball and lift weights all day long. What kind of rehabilitation is this? All I'm doing is hanging out with other drug dealers and other pimps and other hoes and other people who are just doing the same shit that I was doing. And we're learning from each other, learning how to make more stronger drugs, how to cut up drugs more effectively, how to distribute drugs more effectively, what to do with the girls, where to find the girls. I mean, just learn to be better pieces of shit, frankly. And that's what the environment is inside of prison, as long as you can get along with everybody. When you get out of prison, that's what you've gained. Those are the skills that you've now developed. You've developed the skills on how to be a better criminal. That's not rehabilitation. That's not fixing the problem. And that's why so many people continue to end up going back into prison, because they come out the same person that they went in as, except now they have more skills to be a better criminal, right? A more prolific criminal, so to speak. This is the exact opposite of what we're hopefully trying to do with the prison system. The prison system should be set up to rehabilitate people back into society. Okay. When I turned my life around inside the joint, when I came out, I literally couldn't get a job pumping gas. Pumping gas, I couldn't get a job because of my record. So I had to start my own company. And fortunately, I was able to be successful with that. And that took a lot of hard work, as well as just learning how to be a better human being. Takes a lot of hard work, just grinding it out, doing a very laborious job, working very hard. That took a lot of effort. And if a person doesn't have that inside of them and doesn't have a support system, like I had my loving wife, who was tremendous. She was absolutely amazing through that whole process. She had every right to leave me, and she stuck by my side. And so now here we are, married 30 years later, and we have a really good life. We're financially successful. We are emotionally balanced, mentally healthy. We have our physical health. All right. So we're quite fortunate, but that's a very rare outcome. Most people never make it out like that, because the system is designed to help you fail again. They don't want you to be successful. Okay. And I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theory when I say they don't want you to be successful. The system itself is not designed to make success stories out of people who have committed crimes. The system is designed to be self-perpetuating. The system benefits financially from you being locked up. Those beds inside of a prison, inside of a jail, have a value, a dollar value that's ascribed to them. And empty beds don't make them any money. They are an expense, right? So they need to fill those beds, just like any other business does. That's the part of the problem. So they're not motivated to rehabilitate you, right? I put a little note in the description of this video. There should be a sign on your way out of prison up above the door that says, "See you soon." And that's the unfortunate reality of where we're at. They expect you to come back. And let's look at I should be following the chat here, actually. In fact, I want to show the chat on stage. Please do mind your comments, because the comments are going to be showing on the stage. Just like always, I want you guys to be respectful of each other, because that's what we promote at this channel. And I'm sorry if I didn't say hello to everybody. So I'll put this over here just really quick. Nell, it's always so nice to see you, sister. Nathaniel, we said congratulations to you and your family. I don't know if you caught that at the beginning of all this. Robin, my dear sister, is here, and just have so much respect for Robin. I link her channel in every video I do. She's such a huge part of what we're doing with this channel. And so I do encourage you guys, check out Robin's channel, show you who I'm talking about here. Please do go. The link is in the description of this video. Like her videos, watch her videos, subscribe to her channel, and support her efforts, please. I see Scott is here. Welcome, brother. Always good to see you. Joel is here. Hello, family. So nice to see you. Widescreen Naval. I'm so sorry. I don't know if I've seen you before, but I'm so glad that you showed up today, and I didn't mean to ignore everybody here. I really appreciate you being here, Widescreen. Spooky Bed Hair. I always say this whenever I see you. This is my favorite name on YouTube, Spooky Bed Hair. Now, I've got my hair tied back in a ponytail right now, but I actually have some crazy hair myself, and especially when I wake up in the morning. So I think of you often. I hope that doesn't freak you out. B.S. Lewis, one of my favorite people on YouTube, actually. If you guys don't know who B.S. Lewis is, please do check out his channel. I will go back and make sure to get a link to his channel in the description of this video. He does great stuff. Really good. Fatima is here. Hello, sister. So nice to see you. So many names. Okay, so I really appreciate everybody. Let me get this off so I don't. Okay. We will be opening up the panel for everyone to join the conversation. I will get a link up here shortly, but I just want to read over some statistics really quick. Maybe we can all go over. Maybe I should get the link set up now and just pin it. I think I'll do that. Copy. Y'all have to bear with me, because as everybody who watches my channel knows, I'm really, really bad at this technology here. I'm always it's a learning experience, right? Okay, so I think, although I feel like I am getting a little better, but I should do this. What just happened? Oh, there we are. So I said that too soon. Okay, so that's pinned. I hope I pinned the right message. Now I got to get this back off the screen. Okay. Is this showing? It is. Okay, so let's go through some statistics here. All right, I'm still dealing with this something in my chest. It's not affecting my exercises or anything, thank goodness. As a lot of you know, I am recovering from surgery still, and I lost all my muscle. I lost everything. I was down to 110 pounds. So I've finally been healthy enough to start working out again. I've been tracking that. For any of you who are interested in physical fitness, if you have any questions related to physical fitness, please reach out to me. I'm not a dietitian, but I have worked as a certified personal trainer in the past. So I'm happy to help you guys out with any fitness questions you have. And my own fitness, I'm really excited that I'm actually getting back into that. But for whatever's going, some kind of allergies or something, but in my chest, I've been feeling this kind of weird something going on. Okay, so let's look at, okay, so recidivism, for those of you who don't know, and you probably do because my audience is very intelligent, the people who watch this channel, but recidivism is essentially people who reoffend, right? Reoffenders. So nationally, about 72 out of 100 people released from prison avoid reincarnation within 3 years, down from 65 out of 100 a decade ago. So that's a roughly 20% drop in reincarnation rates over the past 10 years. So that means we are starting to recognize this problem. Let's look at national trends. And this is in the United States of America. 3-year reincarceration rate, 28%. That means 28% of the people who are incarcerated, will reoffend within 3 years. Now that number is way too high, even though it is down from 35%, which is ridiculously high. That's more than 1 in 3 people, right? Or, 3 in 10 people, or 1 in 3, however you want to say it. This is a 1 year rearrest rate. Okay, so this is in the first year of being released from prison. Okay, 44% of released prisoners return before the first year out. That is frightening. 44%. That's nearly half the people who get released within the first year will be arrested and returned. 5-year reincarnation rate, reincarceration rate, not reincarnation. Sorry, 5-year reincarceration rate. About 77% of released prisoners are arrested for a new crime within 5 years. 77%. Right, 2/3 of the prisoners are rearrested for a new crime within 5 years. That is insane. That tells you how ineffective the prison system is in the United States of America. 77%. If you had a 77% failure rate in any business venture that you were doing or any project that you were doing, you would be considered a failure. 77% failure rate, right? That is frightening. Okay, state level variations. So it does show us here that the lowest recidivism rates would be like South Dakota, New York, Minnesota. This is 2024 to 2026 data. So this is a significant improvement. If you look at, especially like a place like New York, that's actually dropped quite a bit. So they're doing a better job. The highest rates, Delaware, Alaska, Arkansas, Vermont, and Connecticut. And the thing that you're going to see here, especially when you look at like top 8 states with a greater than or equal to 30% reduction, which is good, would be like Oregon, California. They're putting in programs, Colorado, a lot of left, what do they call it? Blue states, right, are actually looking at this more seriously. Now, there is a problem with these statistics. The reincarceration rate is going to be relative to actually conviction rate. So you have arrest rate and then you have conviction rate. So if judges are just letting people go without actually convicting them, that's not actually solving the problem, right? So we have to really look at what's happening here. States with higher rates than a decade ago. So some states are actually going the opposite direction: North Carolina, Pennsylvania, South Dakota. Key context, policy impact. States with strong reentry programs and job placement initiatives have seen the largest reductions in recidivism. Barriers to success. Formerly incarcerated individuals face high unemployment, low educational attainment, and high homelessness rates. Risk factors, poverty is the strongest predictor of recidivism. Poverty is the strongest predictor of recidivism. I want to look at effectiveness of rehabilitation programs. I thought I had all this ready to go. Okay. Rehabilitation programs are generally effective in improving functional outcomes, quality of life, and social reintegration. though success depends on program type, duration, and individualized support. Inpatient psychiatric rehabilitation programs for adults with serious mental illness have demonstrated positive outcomes, including reduced readmissions, improved psychological functioning, and enhanced quality of life. Core components contributing to effectiveness include structured psychological interventions, vocational support, recovery-oriented goal setting, and transitional care planning. Programs with multidisciplinary teams and continuity of care post-discharge tend to achieve better results through standardized outcome measures, and long-term follow-ups are often lacking. NHS mental health rehabilitation services in England showed that over half of service users were successfully discharged to the community within 12 months, particularly those with higher activity levels, better social skills, and units adopting a recovery-oriented approach. Community-based rehabilitation for older adults. Rehabilitation interventions incorporating outdoor mobility and walking programs have been shown to increase physical activity, endurance, and outdoor mobility in older adults, particularly those from recovering from illness or injury. I talk about this a lot in my personal life. I talk about it not so much in these live streams, but like I said, I do videos about fitness. I've got some posted on this channel, some shorts and some other videos helping people learn different types of way to exercise. Physical fitness is so important for two reasons. One, it helps reduce disease. It gives you a stronger body to fight disease when you get illness, and it's actually a key component to mental health. When we struggle with mental health, there's several factors, but physical health can be a huge contributing factor. All right. In fact, as far as physical health goes, I mentioned fighting off illness once you do get sick. I was physically fit. Even though I'm a former drug addict and alcoholic, I maintain a very stringent exercise program my whole life. I grew up taking martial arts and getting involved in sports from the time I could walk, basically. I was a gym nut. I loved exercising. And so despite all my bad habits, my body was able to maintain a lot of strength because I exercised all the time and I ate right. Eating healthy is a key component of physical fitness. I was struck down with a serious illness that apparently I was born with, but I didn't know. I had no symptoms until I was about in my mid to late 40s. And I ended up in the hospital multiple times for extended stays, several months at a time. The time I wasn't in the hospital, I was literally stuck on my couch. I could not move. I could not get up and walk outside. Nothing. I was done. I just literally withered away. The doctors told me on 3 separate occasions that I would have died if I didn't get to the emergency room when I did, and if I wasn't in such great shape, right? So being physically fit it won't keep you from getting sick, right? Especially if you have a genetic disease like I did, right? But what it will do is it will give your body the strength it needs to fight through these things. And it also creates a habit. A good exercise routine is habit forming, right? So when a lot of people who don't stick with an exercise routine or don't stick with a healthy diet is because they can't develop a habit that they can latch onto, right? And that takes a good mindset. You have to enjoy the pain, so to speak. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but when I hit a good workout and my body has broken down from it, mentally, I know I did something really good for myself, and I feed off of that positive energy. So there's a lot of key elements to it, but they're talking about how important exercise is to rehabilitation here. And it's so true because it's tied to your mental health as much as your physical health, right? So I lost track. Illness and injury. These programs include behavior change techniques and can improve falls-related self-efficiency. Evidence suggests that such interventions are cost-effective and can maintain functional independence. Cost-effective is a point that I want to touch on today in our discussion. This is a huge part of this, and we don't want to think about cost and everything, because cost is a factor. Right, but we don't want cost to be an inhibitor or a preventative thing that stops us from doing the right thing or the most effective thing. Oh, it's too expensive. That's not a good enough excuse. Everything costs time, energy, money, whatever at some point, right? So the cost effectiveness of this is when we make the investment into improving people's lives, right? To improving their mental situation, their mental health, helping them improve their physical health, putting them in a better financial situation. We can actually cut down the financial burden of having to process criminals and reprocess criminals. Remember those statistics, right? 77% of the people who leave prison are going to be back within 5 years. That's staggering. That is extremely expensive, and it's designed to support itself financially, right? Would it be better if we had empty jail cells? Absolutely. Not because we stop prosecuting criminals, stop arresting people who are committing crimes, but because we stopped having people commit crimes in the first place. That's the solution. Everything else is a downstream problem from that, right? Community dwelling older adults without acute health issues. Rehabilitation in this context also reduces hospital admissions, another huge cost on society, readmissions, and long-term care costs, while supporting participation in daily life, education, and employment. Daily life, education, and employment benefits everybody in the community. And we have a global community. We just don't always think in those terms, right? Correlational and vocational rehabilitation. Correctional and vocational rehabilitation. Rehabilitative incarceration programs that provide vocational training, wellness programs, and structured support. We're going to see this a lot. This is a common theme that we're just seeing over and over and over again, right? Vocational training. It all comes down to, I shouldn't say it all comes down to, so much of this is based on people's financial situation. Most people who steal do so because they believe they are lacking. And in fact, many times they are lacking, right? Rich people rarely get involved in petty theft, for example. Now, rich people might get involved in white collar crime, right? But that's kind of a different situation altogether. But for the most part, most theft is ultimately petty theft, possibly grand theft. This comes from a feeling of lacking. If people had enough food, if they had a good place to live, a good shelter, right, and felt fulfilled in their life with who they were as a human being, they wouldn't have a need or a desire to steal things. So we can solve these problems if we look at the root of what's causing this behavior. Because remember, there is no free will, right? Our environment affects so much of our decision making. So we need to improve the environment, and we improve people's, what would we say? Choices, available decisions, right? What they even consider doing. Right? If a person doesn't feel like they're lacking something, the chances of them feeling like they need to take something that doesn't belong to them, that belongs to somebody else, is significantly reduced. Evidence from Norway. This is really important here. So effectiveness varies depending on prisoner characteristics, program quality, and prison conditions. Evidence from Norway indicates that well-designed rehabilitation programs can positively influence employment outcomes, reduce reoffending, and benefit family networks through selection bias, and limited longitudinal data have historically constrained research. And there's a reason for that, because they don't want you to know how ineffective this shit is. I want to highlight Norway, because what is the solution to, is there a solution, right? Well, there are countries who are actually making better choices. Just like we saw over here in these statistics about certain states are seeing a significant reduction in reoffending. Look at Norway as a country. Norway's recidivism rates are among the lowest in the world thanks to a progressive correctional system focused on rehabilitation and reintegration. That's what the prison system is supposed to be doing, rehabilitating prisoners so that they can reintegrate into society as functional members of society. Remember, we are a cooperative species, right? This is how I get to objective morality, right? We know how so much of all values are subjective, good and bad, right? So how do we get to objective morality? Well, we get there because we were evolved as a cooperative species. So we can actually work our way to objective standards for what will allow us to function as the cooperative species that we evolved as. We need each other. Not one of us was raised by a pack of wolves, right? We all had a mother, every one of us, who had to participate in our upbringing to us up to a certain extent, at least to birth us. Most of us had a biological mother that breastfed us or cared for us when we couldn't care for ourselves. Our mother was busy caring for us, so she couldn't build the house that we lived in. That took somebody else to build the house. The guy that was building our house was busy building our house. He couldn't grow the food that the house builder and the mother and I need to eat, right? So we have, and the guy grows the food, so on and so forth. We are a community, and we do actually rely on other people. By the time you get to a point to where you could go live out in the wilderness by yourself, you've already demonstrated that you needed other people to support you to even put you in that position. And even then, you're hoping that nobody drops a nuclear bomb on whatever patch of wilderness that you're living on. You require cooperation, even if you think you're doing it by yourself. Nobody actually is, because we share one world, which is why we need to take human-caused climate change very seriously. We need to take pollution very seriously. We need to take the caring for our fresh water very seriously, so on and so forth. We need to take vaccines very seriously, right? The anti-vaxxers are being so selfish when they think it's their privilege, their right to walk around without being vaccinated because they could possibly be spreading highly contagious communicable diseases. And that is an infringement on other people's freedom and well-being. So we need to take this community, this cooperation very seriously. According to World Population Review, Norway's 2-year reconviction rate measured as a new guilty verdict or plea within 2 years of release is about 20%. This is significantly lower than many Western countries, such as the UK, 59% at 2 years, and the US around 70% in the 90s before reform. Legal Clarity notes that Norway's headline rate of 16 to 20% reconviction is the lowest globally, but cautions that comparison are complicated by differences in how countries define and measure recidivism, and that's fair. We need to look at all statistics objectively and critically, right? For example, some track rearrest, which can be higher, while Norway focuses on convictions. Historical context. Let's get down to why the low rate. Community-based prisons, close to home, allowing frequent family contact. This is kind of goes what I was talking to about my wife and the support that she gave me, because I didn't have family. I was adopted, I think 6 times before I was 14 years old when I ended up moving onto the streets, right? I had no family connection. So I didn't ever really develop close relationships with any of my family members because I never felt like I was a part of any family system. So my wife was extremely important. Now I did have friends. I made some close friends. In fact, I have friends I've known for over 40 years. All right. But I have very few friends. I maintain very few close friendships. I'm very friendly with everybody, but I don't let people in, so to speak, right? I'm very guarded about who I let into my personal life in that way. So the support system that I had around me, I had all kinds of people that I could go ask favors for because I was very friendly with a lot of people, like gang members, drug dealers, prostitutes, escorts, because I worked in the adult industry, porn stars, this and that. I could, go right back into the lifestyle that got me into prison, no problem. Right. Many times after I got out when I was first getting arrested, I did go right back to the adult industry, right? Just right back to work. In fact, there was one time I finally worked my way to what they call the RC, or the Work Release Center. I did like the last 3 months of one of my sentences. And when I got arrested, I was managing a strip club at the time. And so as soon as I got to the Work Release Center, my job, which you're allowed to go to work at, it's called the Work Release Center for a reason, was at the strip club. And I was the manager, so I wrote my own schedule. So I was literally gone 10 to 12 hours a day from the Work Release Center at the fucking strip club where I worked. I mean, so I had the opportunities I had to fix my situation were very limited because of the situation I was in before I even went into prison in the first place. So it's having a support system. This community-based prisons here is extremely important when you're allowing frequent family contact. Whoever's your support system that's going to actually help you make better decisions, prisoners need to have access to these people. These people need to have a way to try to maintain these relationships, right? Human-centered facilities with access to education, work, sports, and culture activities. This is so important, right? Vocational. We talked about how much of an impact money has on this whole situation, right? What causes people to offend in the first place? People who think they're lacking something. Most people don't take drugs and alcohol because alcohol is a little bit of a different story, and certain drugs can be, but hard drugs are extremely poisonous to your body, right? Most people don't intentionally poison themselves for a good time. The reason they're doing it is because they're so broken emotionally and mentally that they're desperate to find an escape. And hard drugs provide that escape for a person. And unfortunately, hard drugs are highly addictive. The other unfortunate part is when you're taking drugs and alcohol to escape your problems, you're not fixing your problems. Right? You're running away from them. And then you're adding more problems with addiction and illegal activity, buying and selling and engaging in drug behavior, so on and so forth. So as well as the dangers of dealing with drug dealers. Drug dealers are very dangerous people, believe me. Restorative justice and rehabilitation programs aimed at addressing root causes of crime. And this is the most important thing right here. This is the one I want to highlight the most. Restorative justice and rehabilitation programs aimed at addressing root causes of the crime. This is what I'm talking about today. The root cause. What is causing people to offend in the first place? If rehabilitation programs aren't targeting this root cause, then they are literally just trying to put a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It makes no sense. The justice system we have is not even remotely effective because it's not attempting to address the root cause. All it's trying to do is catch criminals, convict criminals, charge the state to fill that bed. The state then, of course, gets that money from the taxpayer, right? And then they let that criminal out, knowing full well they haven't addressed the root cause and that criminal is going to be back. And it happens. And we see the statistics, 77% of the time in America. Strong post-release support to help reintegrate into society. This is huge. As I said before, when I got out the last time, my criminal record was so bad that I couldn't get a job pumping gas, right? Now, I am and I'm not trying to be arrogant when I say this, okay? I would say I have above average intelligence. Not only did I run 2 very successful businesses, but I ended up getting patents for my innovative hull design. I'm licensed by the U.S. Coast Guard now to build boats. So I had a lot more going for me than a lot of people do, right? I'm also very physically fit. So I just had so much going for me that I was able to, once I focused myself and applied myself to turn my life around. A lot of people don't have those skills. They don't have the education. They're not they don't have, and I hate to say intelligent because again, I'm not trying to belittle people, but people have certain cognitive abilities. Everybody has something valuable to offer society, right? But not everybody has skill sets that are financially viable, right? So if we don't teach people something, some kind of vocation, then the chances of them changing their behavior, go back to that root cause we're talking about, right? We've got to help with people reintegrate into society. So what are we doing to support people? They have trauma they're dealing with, right? We talked about why do people use drugs and alcohol? Why do they engage in that unhealthy behavior? Why do they intentionally put poison into their own bodies? Willingly do that, willingly face the risk of committing crime. And why do they do that? Because they have trauma. They're trying to cover up. They're trying to run away from. They're trying to bury because they don't have an effective way to deal with it. Today's Norway's recidivism rate is around 20% at 2 years, one of the lowest in the world, reflecting the effectiveness of its rehabilitation-oriented justice system. This success is attributed to human prison conditions, reintegration support, and focus on reducing the cycle of reoffending. So that's the statistics I had pulled up here. Let me get this set aside. Oh, I see some people join the backstage. I'm so sorry. I was not meaning to ignore everybody. I had the other window opened up. And so, okay. Sorry if anybody else was in the backstage. I wasn't meaning to ignore everybody, and I wasn't meaning to ignore the chat, but I was just focused on reading, and I had to have that window pulled up. So, okay. So let me go ahead and do this. Okay. So, is that where I want? Yeah, I do want to leave it like that. So, I think that'll be okay. So we've got Nell and Scott here. You got so nice to see both of you. Really appreciate the support. I see Rio's in the chat. Resist OP. So great to see you, family. Some other people have showed up. Jackie's here. Jacqueline, actually. There's kind of a couple of Jackies, so I want to make sure I get the right one. So nice to see you, Jacqueline. And I really appreciate you guys being here to support me on this today's topic because, as you can tell, probably I'm very passionate about this one. And it is something, like I said before, that affects everybody. So let's open up the floor and get some feedback from 2 of the people who wanted to join us today. Nell, you were up here first, so we'll start with you and then go to Scott. It's nice to see you. What do you have to say about all this?
All this talk about the prison system really fires up the leftist in me. Like, a lot of this resonates with my humanism and my political ideology. It's, to me, it's there's just so much wrong with not just the prison system, but how our entire society is structured that allows for this prison system to thrive. Like the whole idea that there's even an industrial private prison system that profits off making, keeping people prisoners is just, sickening to me.
Oh, I could relate, and not just as a former convict, right? As an ex-con, they say, but as a functional member of society, I can relate to that. It is so broken because we're just literally feeding into the system that we know is broken, and it shows a complete lack of empathy. It's like there's a hungry tiger, and we're just tossing our kids into the pen.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like one of the things that our society has tricked us into believing, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but like to me, it's like they've seemed to somehow made it that being poor is a moral failing, and being successful is a, a moral victory somehow, even though some of the most terrible people are the richest people in the world.
Yeah, that actually, I do agree with you. And that is a very, very good point that you raised. One of the reasons I love doing these open panels because I get brilliant people who are insightful, like yourself, who are allowing us to get information that I wasn't even considering. And you're absolutely right. This is a real moral injustice that we're doing to people by giving this false illusion that money somehow equates to moral efficacy, right? That financial success somehow makes you more ethical human being. Now, there is a correlation to financial success and living a moral and ethical life. Being a ethical business practitioner allowed me to build successful businesses, right? But we have to understand not put the cart before the horse in that, right?
But also, though, to me, though, it seems like only the most successful business people, the billionaire class, it's like, to me, it seems like it's baked into the system. Like, if you want to be a billionaire, if you want to be that obscenely rich, then you have to step on people. You have to exploit people. Like, to me, there's this no way of getting away from that. Like if you want to just be a normal successful businessman, you can do that, ethically, and be, come away from the system just fine. But to me, it's like, if you want to be the most successful, then you might be working through the system legally, but to me, you're trading that off to becoming ethically bankrupt.
That is interesting. I'd have to think about that because I couldn't say one way or the other, just shooting from the hip, because for me, it's what are we doing with our resources that really depends on how ethical we are and how did we get our resources also. And I think what you're really hammering down on here is in the process of acquiring exorbitant funds, perhaps you're saying that it's impossible to do that without engaging in something that could be considered or ultimately to unethical process. And you might be right about that. I have to think about that part of it, because go ahead.
And I would say that, like, when it comes to that sort of thing, like, almost no one's hands are clean, like, not even ours. Like, the fact that our society functions on, like, smartphones, like, buying a smartphone, that was probably outsourced to some country that does sweatshops, basically slave labor. It's kind of hard to not be a part of modern society and contribute in some way to this cruel system that we have.
Yeah, and I really respect your humility and honesty in saying that, because that's literally what I was just thinking about, was how much the consumer responsibility, right? Like I'm a big outdoor guy. I'm really big into kayaking, surfing, things like that. And as a lot of people know, and I love nature. And I do a lot to try to promote, like a river guide, right? But I set aside the first and last day of the season to do like river cleanup days and try to organize community projects to help with pick up litter and stuff like that. But factory farming is our biggest problem when it comes to the climate, is from what I hear from global scientists, right? Now, I'm not a global scientist, but that's what I hear. So how much am I contributing to that with my diet and my other habits? The cell phone you talked about, how much are we contributing to the problems with the planet with we engage in cell phones, driving cars? I mean, there's so many things. Consumers, as you pointed out, have a responsibility and a due diligence to the problem. So can we really blame the massive corporate structure that's selling the cell phones if we're the ones buying the cell phone? The responsibility needs to be spread out evenly. And I think I'm glad you pointed that out, because we do need to have a sense of humility and be honest with ourselves. You know, before we just point our finger at the rich guy and say, you're a terrible person, we have to recognize our own part that we're playing in the system, right?
Oh yeah, like to me, the only group of people that I'm completely against, I would say, is the billionaire class. But it's like the whole structure of society. You know, it's not just on them. It goes all the way down. You know, like, you know, President Trump didn't just come out of a vacuum. It's like, you know, 70+ million people voted for him. It's like, you know, that, you know, he is a reflection of our society. It's not just, you know, it's not just on him. You know, that.
Yeah. No, that's again, your humility and your honesty. A lot of people would not, who are against Trump, would not admit that. And, you know, I actually have to do a video at some point talking about how I was wrong about Trump. I've been saying since the beginning that he seems like kind of a piece of shit, but I'm very ignorant when it comes to politics. And I said that I don't think he's the worst president that we've ever had, but actually he seems like he is trying to set that record for being the worst president. But that's for another conversation. I really appreciate your feedback, Nell, and we are going to open it up to just kind of have a back and forth with everybody, but I want to kind of be structured for opening comments here. So Scott, you were next on the list here. What thoughts do you have about what's been said so far?
Hey, and first of all, I just want to say, really nice presentation you put together for your video. I really appreciate that. And all the information is really spot on, I think. And you're really hammering home the point. You're really kicking ass on this. And I agree with what everybody said so far. And Nell's really made a really good point about the trickle down effect. You know, all this stuff kind of comes from a top down kind of dependence that supports that kind of unethical treatment of other human beings. Now, I would say, like, my only perspective today is that, like, prisoner reform, it represents like a more compassionate and ultimately a more effective approach to justice. Like, when we take seriously, like, the reality of constrained human choice, for example, like, human behavior really doesn't emerge in a vacuum, right? And I mean, we've talked about this before, objective. You know, our decisions are shaped like by our biology, the trauma, the environment, the poverty, addiction, everything you've pointed out, like countless factors beyond our individual control. So I take that to heart. But at the same time, this does not erase responsibility, but it does challenge overly simplistic notions of like absolute free will and how it relates to prison reform. Like, for me, I ground, as you know, I ground objective morality into intuition and emotions and stuff like that, you know, because it's part of humanity. So morality sort of arises from our shared moral concerns, values, and emotional commitments. So if reducing suffering and promoting human flourishing to create like safer communities, if that really matters to you, regardless of what you think about free will, then compassion is really not a weakness. It becomes a rational moral kind of orientation, right? Like, I would say a justice system grounded in compassion is going to ask, you know, how do we punish wrongdoing? But it's also going to ask, how do we reduce harm, restore lives, and expand the condition for better choices, right? So like prison reform, rehabilitation, education, mental health support, and reintegration that you mentioned are not excuses. Like, many people think that when you start talking about this kind of stuff, you're being lawyerly and you're trying to give excuses for the criminal and forget about the victim who needs revenge or whatever. But really what I'm talking about is an expression of a deeper moral commitment to like understanding human limitation, while we're also working towards transformation of the human being. You know, I think that this is possible, and I think that we would have a better society for it. But you know, people are emotional. People have this sort of biblical need for revenge and everything like that. And I just don't think that that's a very rational way or compassionate way to approach that issue.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down, family, and I really appreciate your insight as always, Scott. You're a real deep thinker, and I do respect that about you very much. I think the couple things I want to mention. First of all, and I don't want to detract from this, but I knew there was one thing I was missing. I was talking about what a big month June this month is going to be. I don't know, for those of you that are in the community, probably are familiar with a brother who goes by Nobody on Fire, extremely intelligent young man, really smart when it comes to philosophy. He and I are going to be doing a 2v2 debate on the Raging Tomatoes channel this month, Morality Without God. So I'll definitely keep you guys posted. I'll be dual streaming it on my channel. I'm sure Sarah will let me do that. I was really honored that Sarah reached out to me to do this debate. It's was quite humbling because Sarah's got a big platform. She could have invited a lot of people to do that. When she reached out to me, she said I was at the top of her list because as a non-religious person and an objective moral realist, she said she thought of me first. And I was, like I said, really humbled. And when she said it was a 2v2 debate, she said, first of all, I've never done a 2v2 debate, so this is going to be a really interesting format. But she said that she asked if she wanted, did I want her to find me a partner? And I said, oh, absolutely not. I already know who I'm gonna ask if he wanted to do it. So I was really excited when Nobody on Fire said he would do it with me because he and I are both moral realists. We both take the objective moral position. Neither one of us is religious. So this is going to be a really, really good event. And I didn't mean to detract from this conversation, but when you start talking about morality and objective morality, it just clicked. And I should have said that at the beginning. So please do stay tuned for that event. I'm really excited about that. As far as what you're talking about here, I also want to touch on Ryu. Ryu always has so many great things to say in the chat. Ryu never joins the panel, but you're always invited like everybody else is. Anybody who can be respectful is welcome to join this panel. And Ryu made a really interesting point here. We talked about, Nell and I were talking about, and this actually touches what you were saying as well, Scott. We're talking about the individual responsibility, right? And Ryu brought up something here. We talk about from the consumer's perspective. And Ryu says, I'd say certain music and media entertainment perpetuates the attraction towards criminality, gangster series, movies, gangster rap, UK grime, etc. I think that's actually a lot to be said for that. Because like we talked about with the free will situation, the environment plays such a huge factor. Even if a person believes in free will, they still, I think everybody recognizes, and I got my brother A's philosophy up here, and he and I had a great 3-part conversation on free will versus determinism. And so that was a great conversation, really enjoyed A's input. But I think one of the things that A's and I would agree on, even though we're on two different sides of that argument, is that the environment is extremely important, right? Because it definitely has an effect on behavior. It has an effect on, and we can see this statistically, right? Like I mentioned in some of the statistics that I brought up, how poverty is linked to so much of this criminality, right? So the environment is extremely important. And I think that we all need to understand the reality. And I know Scott is a non-dualist. You probably agree with me here that we're all responsible to create this environment, right? We're all feeding off of this same environment. And this is not a situation that's only happening and isolated in my own home, right? Everything I do, it affects my neighbors and my employees and my customers. They all go to their homes. They have families, and it just spreads like that. And eventually we realize that the entire globe is connected. Once we can get into that mindset, then we can start to say, okay, how can I be more effective in providing a solution? Because that means we all have a part to play in this. And that ties into what Nell was saying. It ties into what you're saying, ties into what Ryu's saying. I really appreciate your feedback, as always, Scott. We're up to Bionic. Chris, it's always so nice to see you, family. Really
hey, buddy, what's going on?
Oh, it's great to have you here, as always. Really appreciate your support for the ARC protest, by the way. And I'm hoping that you'll be around next Saturday when we do that fundraiser event for that, if you can make it. It'll be a good show. Yeah, if you're available. But anyway, Chris, tell me, what do you think about where we're at so far?
I think to kind of touch on a lot of what you were saying, and also to kind of tie in what Scott was saying, I used to work in mental health nursing. And part of what I used to do, there's a lot of overlap between psych and kind of forensics and criminality, right? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So there seems to be a lot of overlap. Specifically, like, I was often asked to be an advocate for rehabilitation programs and kind of breaking the cycle of criminality. And one of the biggest obstacles we used to always face was this kind of preconceived notion of, once you're a criminal, once you've chosen crime, then you're dehumanized. And a common criticism is, why should a criminal be given all these advantages when I'm a working class stiff and I don't have those things, right? So even if we brought the data, like for example, a lot of the data you were bringing to show that rehabilitation and remunerative care is so much better than that just kind of eye for an eye mindset, those statistics almost were hitting a brick wall of people who were saying, well, I've never committed a crime and these are criminals, and it was like begging for sympathy for the devil on some level. And so I think there's also this cultural, I mean, I can get on my soapbox about how we kind of have this, like I said, the dehumanization of criminals. And that extends to when we talk about our prison system, our justice system, our relationship with law enforcement. There seems to be this kind of like binary thinking that once you're a criminal, once you've committed a crime, you don't get sympathy. And if they bury you under the prison, that's a good start. And I think because of that irrational kind of aversion towards sympathy and compassion, that's a huge cultural obstacle to seeing some of those things that you were describing. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, and it's worth a lot more than 2 cents. I'm really on the same page. I really appreciate your input. You always have something great to offer the conversation, Chris, and you're absolutely right. This othering, the us versus them, it feeds into the problem, because what happens when we do that is we lack the empathy because we don't see ourselves in the other person anymore, and that is a huge problem. When we prohibit ourselves from having empathy for the people that we disagree with, that's going to create so many other residual problems that ultimately feed into our own misery, right? This is why the objective moral position, like Scott was talking about, and he's absolutely right, it's based on reasoning, ultimately, right? I don't believe, because I don't believe in any higher powers or anything like that, I don't believe that we have inherent rights or inherent duties. Those are all subjective. We give rights to people, right? We ascribe ourselves duties, so to speak. So what do we have? We have reasons. And the most compelling reasons to do the right thing are based on our own freedom and well-being and equality, and to live this good life. As I've said so many times before, every one of us wants to live a good life. And in order to do that, we have to have self-respect. If we don't have self-respect, we are missing something that is fundamentally necessary for us to live this good life. And we cannot have self-respect if we don't respect each other and if we don't respect the planet. So all of this gives us the reasons, the most compelling reasons to do the right thing. And then we can derive our oughts from there, right? What ought I do? What ought not I do, so to speak? And it's ultimately self-serving because I want to live the good life. So it's having this balance that I talk about on this channel so much, right? This middle way, right? That we want. This is what the Buddha was really trying to explain to people with the Four Noble Truths leading to the Eightfold Path. Is he's trying to help people say, hey, listen, in the Four Noble Truths, he says there is suffering, right? There is an end to suffering, which means there's a way to end suffering. And then the fourth, of course, noble truth leads to the Eightfold Path. And this whole system he's come up with is to help us find this middle way. The middle way entails balancing your own ego, your own sense of self, with everyone around you, right? I make you feel good and I want to sustain you because it actually makes my life better, right? So it's really important to understand how all this is interconnected. Ace, that's always great to have you up here, brother. I really appreciate you stopping by. Before I get into your comment, do you mind if I ask, how are you feeling? The last couple of times I heard you on your channel, you barely able to speak. I couldn't believe you were doing live shows.
Well, I'll speak now. I think I'm doing a lot better. Do I sound any better?
You do sound. You're a little quiet. I don't know if you want to get a little closer to your microphone or maybe turn your volume up a little. But
that's the volume. Yeah, that's the volume. Let me see if I can get the volume up.
Oh, that's getting better already.
Yeah, sometimes my mic automatically adjusts and it's lower when it first starts, and then it gets higher. I don't actually do anything. I don't know why it does that. I wish it wouldn't, but Is it good? Is it good enough now? Is it better now?
Definitely, yeah, definitely hear you a lot better. Thank you for that.
Good.
Go ahead and what do you think about the subject? I'm glad you're feeling better. Your voice sounds a lot better. So yeah, what do you feel about? I know you and I have some different ideas when it comes to free will and probably political ideas. So I'd be curious as to what you think about the overall topic with the justice system and what you see as problems and what you see as potential remedies, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to apologize. I know you gave a presentation. Unfortunately, just because I wasn't, here, I just did not see any of your presentation, and I actually joined as you were ending your presentation. So if I say something that you addressed in your presentation, feel free to just throw it back at me and say, like, I said this and I mentioned this, and this is why it's, that's a problem. But as for me, I think the United States actually has one of the best justice systems that has ever existed. It's not necessarily the system itself that's the problem, but when we see abuse, I think it's tied more to individual corruption of people within the system. I think you can design a perfect system as far as how it operates and how it's structured, but you're always going to have corruption because humans basically tend towards corruption, unfortunately, and that's the result of their free will. So I think the United States has an excellent justice system. Is it perfect? No. Nothing in this world will ever be perfect. I think the United States, institutionally, as it's structured in the Constitution, is the best country for, I think, probably almost in the history of the world as far as, setting the groundwork and framework for human flourishing. Now, I know this wasn't part of the discussion, but it was brought up that, Donald Trump is trying to set the record for being the worst president ever. And as someone who voted for Donald Trump 3 times, I'm actually very curious to know what, if people wanted to go into that conversation. I know it would be kind of a diversion, but I am really curious to know what people are seeing that they think is so bad, because maybe I did make a mistake. I mean, has Donald Trump been perfect? No. He's made a lot of mistakes. He's has a lot of flaws as a human being. I will say that right away. But I definitely don't think he's anywhere close to the worst president ever. And if people just want to, mention some things that they think he's doing wrong, I'd be willing to listen and hear what those things are. So I guess I'll just, that's kind of where I stand with all these things. I'll end there.
Yeah, that does leave a lot to unpack. It is quite a diversion from the justice system conversation, and I would like to really get as much feedback on that particular topic. However, this is really an open panel. I try to make this a platform for you guys for anybody who joins actually to really feel free to introduce their own ideas and stuff. So maybe that might be something that other people, I'm sure there are people on this panel who would who would be willing to engage in that conversation. My request would be humbly to ask if we could try to keep all comments tied to things that ultimately relate to the topic, or at the very least to well-being, right? Then we kind of keep things somewhat linear. But at the same point in time, I want you guys to be able to engage with each other as you see fit. I'm not here to set any rules other than respect. So how do I want to proceed with that? So the statistics that I brought up demonstrably refute the claim that America has the best justice system, and that's well evidenced in. You could go to a number of places. So what I would say is there is some room for agreements or some common ground, as always, between us. And one of the things I really enjoy about my relationship with you, A's, is that you and I are always engaging in respectful dialogue, even though we are willing to say, hey, look, we just have a fundamental disagreement here. And so I always try to, and I think you reciprocate that, we always try to find some common ground, which is really important when you have disagreements with people, right? That's the most important thing, because we actually don't want everybody to think the same thing all the time. That is not the kind of world we want to live in. So what we need to do is focus on common ground and then figure out how we can respectfully deal and effectively deal with our disagreements. The common ground that I see with you is that even if we say the system itself is great, which I'm not willing to say that in general, but if I granted that, right? If I granted that the U.S. has this great system, the corruption issue is a major factor. And this is a huge problem, because even if we introduce the perfect system, or if we just grant that this is the perfect system, corruption is going to sabotage any potential success. Any chance of success is going to be sabotaged with corruption. So we like to talk on this channel about getting to the root cause of things, right? And I think you're touching on something that's really important and very valid here, is that the corruption is ultimately going to be one of these root causes. And one of my experiences with the justice system is one of the places that I was incarcerated, they had a program, right, where somebody had purchased a huge several acres of land, and they have, sometimes people call it like a halfway house or a halfway program, right, where offenders, once they're released, they will allow them to live in these situations, right? And these situations are technically not jail. It's not exactly like the work release center, but it is similar in that there are rules that you have to abide by. So sobriety, right? You can't have your girlfriend stay in the night, all this kind of stuff. You have curfews. Almost all of them have curfews in place. So it's kind of like a structured way for offenders to live, which kind of helps guide them along. And in theory, this sounds actually like a great idea. And I think we should look into these things. The problem is that it turns out that the person who owned this land was getting subsidized by the government as well as private investors. And so they were financially motivated to keep people there, right? And they ended up having this highly corrupt system where they were threatening people to reviolate them, right? Because everybody, when they get out, is on what they call post-prison supervision, probation or parole, some kind of most people are, this is part of your sentencing, right? And which is also important. We actually do want people under some type of post-prison supervision for a certain period of time to make sure that they are following the rules. How that gets implemented is also corrupt. I mean, you see corruption throughout the whole process. So if we said, let's say that this post-prison supervision structure is actually not just based on checking in with your PO and doing UAs and paying your fines to the PO, because that's another bullshit system where now the offender who can't even get a job now has to pay their supervision fees, they call them, right? The whole thing is set up to make people fail. You can't get a job and you can't hardly pay your own resources, pay your own rent, get your food, maybe take a partner, right, out to a nice meal or something and integrate into society like everybody else wants to do, because you've got to pay extra money into your restitution for your crime. You've got to pay for your supervision fees. You've got to pay for your UAs, all this other bullshit. If that system, that post-prison supervision, was more about rehabilitation programs, right? Like we talked about in some of these statistics and some of these things that I showed other successful countries like Norway are doing. And it's actually designed to say, hey, look, we have job placement programs. That's part of your post-prison supervision. We have counseling available. We have exercise programs, so on and so forth. That would be a better type of post-prison situation than what we have going currently. The corruption is a huge issue when it comes to this privatized halfway house, right? Where these people are now living on this farm, doing all of this work. They're selling all that product that they're making. The people living there aren't getting anything for their work, their time, or they're getting pennies on the dollar. So they're being taken advantage of, just like the people who work inside the prison system for 50 cents a day, right? It's a day, or maybe it's an hour at this point, maybe 50 cents an hour. But I don't even know if it's that much. They make very little money. And then the prison, of course, is selling their furniture, the license plates to the Department of Motor Vehicles, whatever it is they're producing, and they're making fair market value for this. But the prisoner, the actual laborer, is literally, it's like worse than sweatshop. It's insane. So the corruption aspect. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Can you just, I hate to do this, can you just briefly for like a minute or two, because you mentioned the statistics refuting
yeah.
Can you just briefly show them again, just so I can know exactly what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Let me bring this, do this. And so looking at the United States here. So the US, nearly 75% released individuals do not return to prison within the first 3 years, but within 5 years, they are rearrested and reoffend. 77% in America. Now, this is the US. 77% of released prisoners are arrested for a new crime within 5 years. So to me, that does not scream success. That screams massive failure.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess what I'm going to say is that isn't necessarily a reflection of the justice system. That might be a reflection of the individuals being, convicted. So we have to consider that.
But can I say something real quick?
I agree. Oh, of course, Chris. Absolutely. Let me just respond to you.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're opening this up, so you guys are welcome to chime in here. But A's, you're right. I agree with you 100%. The individual does have responsibility, and I don't discount that at all. However, the issue is what caused them to offend in the first place, and what have we done to address? Remember, we talk about the root problem, right? And so if we're not doing anything to address the root problem, we're just going to see a repetition of the behavior, which is what the statistics show is happening. And especially when we compare it to a place like Norway, which has the world's lowest recidivism rate, right? And they're down to less than 20% of people reoffend. That's a huge difference. And yet, what they say is because they focus on community-based prisons, human-centered facilities, restorative justice and rehabilitation, and strong post-release support. So you have so much of what America doesn't have, and you see the statistics seem to reflect the efficacy of what Norway's doing compared to what we're doing. And
okay, I do want to say something. I know there's 5 people on the panel. I don't want to hog the airtime, but
no. I'm opening this up. I'm going to actually step away and heat my coffee. I'm still listening, but you guys, it's an open format at this point. Okay. Do you want me to leave those stats up, or do you want to pull this window back up here?
It's up to you. Yeah, I understand what you're saying right now.
Okay.
To me, success of the justice system is more based on, do the people who get convicted of crimes actually commit the crimes? That's to me like what the justice system is are the people being convicted of crimes actually guilty, and do they actually receive a sentence or punishment that corresponds to the crime they committed? And to me, recidivism rate means the person committed another crime. So to me, success is the justice system acknowledging that the person committed another crime and then, issue the punishment. So recidivism rate isn't a responsibility of the justice system. It's part of our societal culture at large. And it's not necessarily the justice system. It's what is it in our society that results in people doing this at higher rates than other countries and nations and societies. So that's how I would respond to that.
I think my quick question, sorry, Scott, is, you do understand that, criminality does not happen in a vacuum. It is often a result of a number of factors, primarily having to do with economics and education and basically job opportunities, for example, right? And this goes back to, I think, a point where I was making, where there's this assumption of a criminal is intrinsically amoral, or that criminality is always the direct kind of individualistic decision, that everybody who commits a crime made a conscious effort to do that, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is, how you're defining the criminal justice system, catching people and putting them in jail, that's the easy part, right? But that's, to me, 25, maybe 20% of what I talk about when I talk about the criminal justice system. Because for me, criminal justice is also about protecting the community, rehabilitating those who have committed a crime, and re-socializing them so that they can get back into the society to be functioning members. So maybe it just boils down to our definition of, 1, what leads to criminality, and 2, what is the role of the criminal justice system? Does that change the perspective of kind of why we're having to do
what you said makes sense? I will say that. That. Yeah.
I mean, my thought is that the justice system may not be responsible for fixing every person, but it is responsible for creating conditions that reduce future harm. So if we know that rehabilitation, education, addiction treatment, or mental health support can lower repeat offending, then ignoring those tools becomes a policy choice with moral consequences. So it just depends on what kind of society do we want? Do we want one that just is there to exact vengeance for each other? Is just a place that we can facilitate the vengeance that we have against those that do us extremely wrong? Or is it something that, applies punishment, but it gives us the conditions to make a better society? That's the question. It just depends on what your values are.
And I think that, we're not addressing the elephant in the room is like, I don't see how you can make the argument that it's just individual people within the system making, corrupt choices when, the private prison system, like to me, that's baked in legal corruption. Like you are incentivizing society to put people into prison. Like you are trying to find ways to lock people up. Like,
yeah, private prisons. Like if there's a profit motive, then the profit becomes the immediate motivation to arrest people.
I want to respond to that.
There's no reason to really want them to be rehabilitated. That's not good for business. It's the same thing with like some of these bogus pharmaceutical companies that may want to push, a very addictive, highly addictive drugs to treat something like depression or whatever. They don't want you to be cured. The money's on the comeback, man. It ain't in the fixing the problem, really. That's not.
I want to. Sorry to kind of interrupt a little bit there, Scott. I do acknowledge your point. I want to respond to this talking point that about the private prison system. We have to. Something that's always bothered me about this argument is that the prisons aren't the ones arresting people. It's if there's a problem there, the prisons can't put anyone in their prisons. These private prisons. It has to be. You have to argue that these judges who are adjudicating these criminal cases are the ones working hand in hand in this sort of conspiracy to get funding for these prisons. And if that's the case, again, that's not the system. That's not the private prison system. That's individual corruption. So we have to remember private prisons can't arrest anyone. They can't just go off on the street and arrest random people and ask for funding for those people. There actually have to be criminals committing crimes. Well, go ahead.
Well, I would say that's a good point. No, I would say that's a good point. But you got to remember that people are clever.
And it's like the police forces work hand in hand with the prison system. It's like police officers get quotas to arrest people or give out tickets to, like, they are incentivized by this for-profit
system. Let me ask you, are there judges out there?
Yes.
Hold on, let me ask the question.
Yes.
Let me finish the question. Can you point to this massive conspiracy where judges are convicting people of crimes they haven't committed? Because I haven't seen any examples of this taking place where someone was put in a prison and then there's these people clamoring this person didn't commit a crime.
But you're creating a straw man.
One piece of evidence I can cite that's relative to your question here, is I can't remember exactly when it happened. I believe it was in like maybe the 90s when they instituted what's called sentencing guidelines. And the reason that they had to institute sentencing guidelines is because judges were notoriously convicting or like people of color to significantly longer sentences than white people in America, or men were getting significantly longer sentences than women, so on and so forth. So because of this huge imbalance that fed into people's own personal biases of these judges, they had this untethered power. The state said, wait a minute, we can't just let these judges start making all these decisions without having some kind of structure to it, because there's obviously biases, their bigotry, their misogyny, or whatever it might be that's playing into this, right? So they came up with what's called sentencing guidelines. They wouldn't have come up with these sentencing guidelines if there wasn't corruption with the judges. That would be one response I'd make to that.
Okay, well, let me just respond one thing. Now, sentencing, you can say that these judges were racist and giving longer sentences, but nothing compelled those people to commit those crimes in the first place. So if you can't do the crime, if you don't do the crime.
Yeah, I would disagree fundamentally with nothing compelled them. And I think that there's statistics, a number of them, that show that poverty is linked to criminality, for example. Drug use is significantly more prevalent in poor neighborhoods, for example. So there's certainly something that's correlated to this tendency to this particular behavior, right?
Well, all right. I know I just want to say one more thing, and I won't speak for another. I just want to hear what other people have to say. I'll take 5 minutes out. Poverty. It's the chicken and the egg question. Is criminality caused by poverty, or is poverty caused by criminality? I would argue that poverty is the result of a criminal mindset. These people are creating the world that exists within their own, moral framework. And the more you have a criminal mindset, the more you're going to create an environment where your society is breaking down. So again, this goes back to the people, the free will choices that these people are making.
That's a great point. I would disagree. First of all, you're not on any kind of time restriction. Your input is extremely valuable because you're giving us an opposite side of the coin to think of. And I appreciate that everyone's being so respectful with each other. The one pushback I would say, and I'm speaking from personal experience, is that criminal behavior, it can be extremely lucrative, right? So drug dealing is extremely lucrative. Strippers make $600 to $1,000 a night. Escorts make $1,500 to $5,000 a night. Porn stars make $3,000 every 30 minutes. I mean, criminality can be extremely lucrative. So criminality doesn't necessarily lead to poverty. So I think that's a misunderstanding there. But otherwise, go ahead. I'll let you guys go have a back and forth. And we have somebody else. Actually, it looked like somebody came and went. No, we have two people. Oh, I'm sorry. I have two people waiting back here. I don't know how long you've been here. I'm so sorry. I stepped away for coffee. So before we go to the back and forth, just out of respect for everybody, let's give some equal time here. Chris, you're going to have the floor. And then after that, we're going to go to Robin. And then we'll just all have this back and forth. And I'm sorry if you guys felt like you were being ignored back there. I don't know how long you're in the backstage. But Chris, you're up. You've got the floor.
Okay. I think I'll just make this interesting observation is, when the drug dealer, I mean, I guess I could just talk about the culture and how we kind of frame these things. The drug dealer is seen as the scourge of the country, but the moonshiner and the rebel, the rebel yell guy, what I mean? That's seen as almost the Robin Hood style, right? So I think a lot of times when we talk about criminality or the criminal mindset, a lot of time it boils down to who is the criminal we're talking about. I'll make another point. Like, it's funny, and I'm not taking a pot shot here. But the difference between a rioter and whatever you call what they did on January 6th seems to be, well, what flag were they waving when they did it? And maybe that kind of answers some of my other criticisms of our criminal justice system. It seems to be a two-tiered system where when you're part of the in-group, your criminality is seen, there's a justification where you're seen as a victim of a swamp that's trying to weaponize law enforcement against you. But when you're in the other side of that conversation, then bury them under the prison because they're just genetically predisposed towards crime and deviancy, right? So again, I think we should meditate on some of the way we frame.
Yeah, no, that feeds into what Ace had brought up with corruption. I think that's relative, and I think it's important because I was living just south of LA during the Rodney King riots. I was in Portland during the BLM riots. And there is a huge difference between a protester and a rioter, right? And it's really important. I think standing up for what you believe in and protesting lawfully is extremely important part of what we have here in America, right? We need to not vilify peaceful protesters because they're bad actors who are damaging private property in the process, right? Those were two very, very good causes. What happened to Rodney King was not just a tragedy for Rodney King himself and George Floyd himself, but it really showed a light on what was happening systemically. And so we need to stand up against that. Insurrectionists at January 6th, right? There's a huge difference between how that's viewed depending on what side of the aisle you're on. And I think that's really important. Chris Moore, when I said Chris, you have the floor. I actually meant Chris Moore. So you're up, and then we're going to go to Robin, and then we're going to open this up for everybody. So Chris Moore, you've got the floor.
Yeah. And to be quite honest, I don't really mind. The thing that I would like to add, though, is that but the American system is very skewed to criminalize things that are what I think are unnecessary, or basically beyond measurable, like not do harm, but like unnecessary harm. One of the things that that's kind of like on the rise is is the the criminalization of homelessness, and then there you kind of package it up with nonviolent crimes, which also it basically includes possession of drugs, whatever variety, or like even like small quantities. And I'm not talking about use. I'm not talking about stuff like that. But it's just it, and also the due to the effect of homelessness again. There's basically like um, there's basically like the white collar crimes that's up above all that too, which is also more like centered towards the corporations, and it just creates an environment that essentially just like it's a no win win. Sorry, it's a lose lose situation, and as a result, people are like just as like fuck it kind of attitude, and that's basically where people just like to say like do incremental crime gradually because they don't feel that they have a very fair shake in the world and stuff like that. Like I don't have any other like examples, but though like one thing that I really find it somewhat like not horrid, but it's like very like why aren't you doing this? Um, is the um, is the establishment of not like we all have the establishment of 911, but also the funding of uh, mental service health lines and stuff like that. That it's basically it's like oh mental health. It's like it's not you really take it seriously and all that stuff. So yeah, I know that I'm basically jumping from point to point without like a central message, but it's just that's one of my like opinions, and it also kind of goes with my country too as a Canadian too. So and
No, but
yeah,
all your points are relative, as usual, Chris Moore, and I always appreciate your input, brother. Mental health, we vilify that, don't we? Right? We criticize and condemn, and we belittle people for having mental issues or mental problems, and I think that's a huge issue because every single one of us has mental health issue to a certain degree, and that's not to minimize other people's trauma, but it's to just be realistic about the fact that not one of us is perfect, right? Every one of us has struggled with something in life, and we all have something we have to overcome and we have to learn to adjust. And sometimes most often we need someone else to help us get us through that, right? To educate us. And so to support us in that process. And so I think the mental health thing is really important. We're vilifying people instead of helping people. And that's a huge issue, right? And I appreciate you bringing that up. Robin, you're up next. And it's so great to see you, sister.
Hello. This is a great conversation. I'm sorry. I've been, you know me, I'm jumping back and forth. But,
I know this has become a really popular time slot. When I moved the show to this time slot, nobody else was doing anything.
I know.
And I noticed there's like 3 or 4 people who are launching shows at the same exact time. So I really appreciate everybody who showed up today. We're just going to keep chugging along, and nobody's obligated to be here. I want you to support, as many people as possible in this community. Don't feel like anybody's hurting my feelings if you go somewhere else.
Well, don't worry. I try to jump back and forth, but I have told everybody else, he was first. So, yeah, I haven't pointed out that. So, yeah, I wanted to address like the crime. Like we know we like statistics show us that reducing poverty reduces crime, because when we see poverty, reduced as we did. Like we reduced child poverty, like in the last, like I'm not going to credit it with just Biden, but under Biden's term, child poverty went down. and we did see a decrease in crime during that period, and and I feel like that they know this because we know we have all these we found out over years since it happened that there was an intentional there was intentional incarceration of African Americans, like over drugs. Like you would have people who were caught with powder cocaine, and then you would have people caught with crack cocaine, and the rates of like what the sentences were like extremely higher for the people with the crack cocaine, even though it's the same drug, just in a different form. So like, and so they knew this. This is why they intentionally were doing that at some some extent, and so we see that all over the world though. That when you reduce poverty, you reduce crime. It just works out that way because people, when they're struggling for the basics in life, they do what they have to do sometimes, and it puts you in a more of a survival mode, which is more of like I would say back to more of our instinctual behaviors that we as we are apes, so we do ape like things sometimes when we get in a position to where we feel like we're threatened, our survival is threatened, and I just want to say I always I refer to the BLM protest as like I felt like the riots. I don't know if I don't feel like the people that were rioting or doing the looting were actually the protesters from BLM. I think there was a lot of troublemakers there, people that used that as a possibility for them to do stuff and be covered by it. So I just want
to
go ahead.
I just wanted to say really quick that to that point that when it comes to poverty, we don't want to put ourselves in poverty, so we have to educate people or somehow. But see, it's very difficult because, for example, my children are now grown. They're grown up now. And now they're starting to want to move out and do things and explore life. What is my advice? My advice is don't have kids out of marriage, or that you have a committed partner, whatever. It doesn't have to be marriage necessarily in the sense of that. But I always tell them, don't go out here and just have a lot of kids that you can't take care of. If you want to be poor, that's your fastest route to being broke and poor for the rest of your damn life, is to have kids when you're only 19 years old. A lot of kids these days are having children out of wedlock, and then they don't have the means to take care of them because they haven't had the chance to get out and get educated, maybe go to college, maybe do a lot of things, or they don't even get this kind of information from parents. Why? Because they also come from single parent homes where somebody made a poor decision early on and had a kid out of wedlock very young. Now, so this is my greater point. It's not about blame though. It's just about let's deal with the facts. Like the last thing I want to do is say, hey, I can do it. My kids know better. So why can't yours? What's your damn excuse? I'm not taking that attitude at all. I'm just saying that it's just not as simple for a lot of people because they don't have a father to tell them stuff like that, or they don't have a mother to tell them stuff like that, or their parents are too young to know even those things themselves because they're not wise enough to know such things for whatever reason, right?
Also,
so to deal with that issue, how do we address that?
Sorry. Also to like add to the list of crimes that shouldn't be crimes, sexual education, like around the country, and even Roe v. Wade and all that crap that goes along with it. It's basically, and sorry for basically putting that. It's just like conservatives in the United States have dragged this for more than 30 years, 40, 50 years, and it's like the results show that if you have a comprehensive sexual education and also access to contraception, either the oral pill or the condom, or
both.
or both. It's like you have the results of kids not just going as.
Okay, I want to ask, who doesn't have access to those things? I'm just curious. In the United States,
Lots of people. Lots of people.
No,
I have.
yeah, you can go to a gas station and buy a condom for like, I don't know what they are now.
I know, but like in Kentucky, we have little girls that get pregnant that don't even know how you get pregnant. Like they're not receiving sex education at an early enough age to even prevent the pregnancy.
That's not the system's fault. That's the parents.
Yes, it is the state's fault.
If you're poor, you cannot afford to buy these things. Like this, I almost want to say then I'll
So easy.
okay, that doesn't work. People have sex.
It doesn't work. Okay, that's
no, it doesn't.
That's the poverty mindset.
Abstinence only has never worked. Never in the history of the world has abstinence worked as an effective.
Actually,
no, it's not. But
not
Scott,
with that attitude. I'll say that. Not with that attitude.
Well, we have statistics to show this all over the place, but
there are a lot of
you're not going to publicly flog me. You're not going to publicly flog me for having my children out of wedlock, are you, Scott? Because that's what Claire.
No. What I'm saying is because hell, I had my child out of wedlock. The difference is that's why I'm saying I don't mean marriage like you have to be married. I mean like a committed type of thing. It makes it easier, just practically. I think that's something that, like, for me, like, I am not, and I admit I'm not like a liberal progressive. I'm more of a libertarian socialist, kind of like a somewhere in the middle. So I agree with some things with conservatism philosophy and some things a lot of things on liberal philosophy or whatever. But one of the things I do agree with, just from my own experience, is I've been raising kids with my wife, and then I've had a number of years where I was raising my kids without someone to help me. And let me tell you what women go through when they're trying to raise children, it's not easy. Put it that way. It's hard to get a job when you have small children at home that you can't leave there. Otherwise, you're going to have your children taken away from you. So you have to be there or have someone. But what if you don't have enough money to pay for, childcare all day long, right? These are the things you need to think about before you have children. But the fact of the matter is, we all make mistakes. We all do these things. But it's just so easy to say, well, you made bad choices. Why do I have to pay for it? Screw you. Let you suffer. And if your kids grow up to be criminals, good. We'll throw them in prison where they belong. I don't think I don't think that's the answer either. I think. Go ahead, man. Yep.
No, something I'm noticing, and it almost becomes like, there's this idealistic kind of rugged individualism. Well, we've been trying that for God knows how long. It's just not working. At what point do we consider a different tact?
Right.
You could keep saying that over and over and over, but if our criminality, if our crime rates aren't changing, if our healthcare needs aren't changing, if our economics aren't changing, at what point do we abandon the ship just because it sounds nice on the tongue? You know what I mean? At what point
that's
something different?
Point. It's like I understand each person's point of view. I do get the conservative complaint that hey, why do we have to pay for people's bad decisions? It's common sense. You wouldn't want to have to pay for out of your taxes the bad decisions people make that the government allows and people allow. I get it, but it's just not that simple, I don't think. And I think that if we want something to be different, it's like you just said, Chris, we're going to have to come up with a different idea.
Well, to be and to be honest, Ace, like for me as a Canadian, sex ed is mandatory in gym class from basically 7th grade, 8th grade, all the way through. And it's like age appropriate stuff, but it basically we learn how the reproduction system, how it functions, and all that stuff. Not even like from what I hear from the States, are like school boards are allowed to teach that type of stuff in the classroom in the United States, and to me, this is abhorrent. So
You're wrong. You're wrong. I would say you're wrong. Sex ed is part of the curriculum. I'm not sure which states don't have it, but most
There's a
states
lot.
do have
There's
sex
a lot.
ed. So you need to be aware of that.
like, okay.
I mean,
I'd like. Oh, go ahead. After you respond, and I know Ace, you might have something to say. I'd like to add something to this as well. Go ahead now.
I mean,
I'm sorry, real quick.
Yeah, I
have
don't
dinner
know.
plans. I love you all. I'm gonna head out.
Okay.
All right. See you around, man.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Chris, thank you. It's so nice to have you here.
Bye, Chris.
Yeah,
Bye,
see you
Chris.
guys. Adios.
All right, Chris. Thank you, man.
Mhm.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head of which states have actually good comprehensive sex education versus those that don't. But I mean, just to add to to Chris's list of things that I wish conservatives would stop wasting time trying to criminalize things. My existence of being a trans woman. It's like this whole battle over my gender identity. I wish the government would just stay out of my
No one's trying to criminalize that. No one's trying to criminalize that.
It is.
Hold on, let me ask. I want to ask. I'm being honest. What laws are being created that are attacking you and your identity? I'm serious.
Bathroom.
And listen, excuse me. When I talk to Nell specifically, what laws are being created that you feel are an attack on your identity? I know this is a diversion we're going into, but you brought this up, so I want you to give me so I can be aware of what you're going through.
Mm-hmm. So it's no longer like, why is it that we can no longer be serving in the military if we want to?
Well, sir, let's just first of all state that serving in the military is not a right that anyone has, and it's not actually. And there are a lot of it.
So what is the good reason why a trans person, like, is there any actual scientific backing, medical backing, that a trans person is somehow less prepared to serve their country?
I think there are. I think that.
So what is it then?
Yeah. What study specifically are you referring to, Ace?
Okay, I will admit I don't have a study off the top of my hand, and I'm not saying this to attack trans people. I want trans people to feel respected, but there are certain truths that we have to acknowledge, and one of them is that being trans gender dysphoric, whatever you want to call it, is associated with a high risk of a lot of other
and you do realize
diagnosable mental conditions.
So you do realize the Trump administration is trying to dismantle our healthcare so that we can get gender dysphoria treated.
Right.
So
yeah, other people. This is going back to what Scott said. Other people don't want to pay for your cosmetic surgery.
It's not cosmetic surgery.
It is.
No. That's not exclusively a cosmetic surgery situation. Treatment covers a number of different aspects.
Okay, well,
and this isn't just about cosmetics. Like, we're talking about like HRT, and for younger people, puberty blockers.
It does nothing you all do changes you into the other sex. It's basically all temporary. And there are a number of people who've
I never stated that these things magically turn me into the other sex biologically. No.
Okay, so if you want, basically none of them actually creates a reality where you are the other sex. So that means it's cosmetic. All right.
No, this is divulging into a whole nother. I really want to focus on the topic. I don't mind having a conversation about this, but I don't think this is appropriate to put Nell on the spotlight right now, or anybody else, frankly. I want to
Well,
I want to reroute this. I mean, I think it's an
Justice
important
system.
conversation to have, because I think we need to start having these conversations respectfully. And I think you are trying to be respectful on both sides. And I appreciate that because this is a very emotional topic for a lot of people. We need to start making intelligent decisions based on facts and based on science, not just based on emotions or dogmas or what we think are, whatever. Actual statistics and facts. And I think the statistics are actually against you in a lot of ways in this position you're talking about, A's, and I'm willing to have that conversation with you. But let's reroute this a little bit, because there's an important thing that's been brought up here. Excuse me, that I don't want to let go too far, because it was mentioned quite a while ago. Scott was talking about the two parents in the household. I recently had a debate against a person who goes by Jill. As you know Jill very well. I think probably most people in this community know
Yeah,
Jill.
we know him.
Yeah, he's pretty notorious at this point. But he and I had a debate about biblical morality, and Jill really tried to muddy up the whole debate by talking about the household and the children and what biblical morality points to. And he was conflating this statistic about two parents in the household with two biological parents, because that was a way for him to hijack in heteronormative behavior. I looked at these studies, and I looked at a number of other studies during this debate, and I actually refuted his point. However, it's because it's not about biological parents. Biology has absolutely nothing to do with the efficacy of good parenting. The true statistic is, and what Scott's pointing at, and he's absolutely right. The brother's absolutely spot on the money here when he says two parents in the household have a significant advantage. They're giving their children a significant advantage, is what it turns out to be, right? But two parents could be two men, two women, a transgender person, a man and a woman. It doesn't matter. It's two parents, hopefully two functional parents, right? People who are relatively stable economically, financially, right? Mentally, physically, so on and so forth, so they can be good parents. This is the thing that I hammer on a lot in this channel recently, is about when I talk about having less children. I think it's unethical to just be popping out 6, 7, 8, 9 kids. I think there's absolutely no excuse for people to do that at this point, because the burden it puts on the ecosystem. Okay. But the biggest crime is to have children that you cannot support, whether it be support emotionally, support financially, support physically, in every single way. So if you could support the children that you're having, then nobody has a right to tell you you can't have those children. And that means a single parent can do that as well, right? I had one of my mothers was a certified badass, hardworking woman, emotionally stable, there for her children as much as she could be. I mean, single mothers are some of the most amazing, most well-accomplished, most capable human beings that have ever walked on the face of this planet. And I'm telling you also, if men had to have the babies, we would have gone extinct a long time ago. All right. So I'm definitely down with what Scott's saying about two parents in the household have a huge advantage. But I also want to give a shout out to my mothers and my single mothers out there, because you are so important. And single mothers have done so much for this country. Women have done so much for this country in general. And I think they need to be recognized for this and really admired for what they've done. But two parents in the household. Oh, I'm sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and I'm just, you hit the nail on the goddamn head on that one. But the other thing I wanted to say too, that I meant to add to my other comment that I didn't finish, is that when in real life though, you can't control whether your significant other is going to stay around to help you with the kids. Here's the thing when we talk about blame, and this is oftentimes parroted. This is the one thing I was trying to say all along, is that sometimes we like to blame the woman because she's single and has all these kids, right? And understand she's the one that gives the birth, and she is the one that picks the man, and all those biological facts are true. But what I'm saying is that, what about the men? What about the guys who make women pregnant and walk away when they promised her he was going to be there for her, love the children, all of that? She couldn't control that. And now she thought she was doing the right thing by getting with this good man, having children, trying to have a family and do the right thing. And the guy felt cornered or felt trapped and decided to leave. But no one ever talks about that part. The only thing people like to talk about, though, is how the woman made bad choices and had all these kids. I don't think that's realistic either, though.
No, you're absolutely right, brother. And this stems, and I'm not here to just bash on organized religion because that's not the topic of the show, but this stems from toxic laws and a toxic mindset that was started by organized religion. The Abrahamic religions, if you look at the Bible, you will not find a single verse that vilifies men for not being virgins when they get married. You'll find a number of verses that not only vilify women, but say you should throw rocks at women for having sex outside of marriage or get pregnant outside of marriage. In Sharia law, they've actually come up with a law, a special exclusion to where people can have a temporary marriage so that they can have sex, right? It's literally insane. But what happens is the woman gets pregnant, right? In the temporary contract, she has to live in a society that literally vilifies single women who have children. So that temporary law does nothing for her in the future if she ends up getting pregnant. The whole system is set up to vilify women. And it started thousands of years ago, and it gets parroted through these organized religions to this day. And society is built around these structures. It has so much influence on how we treat people. And this is that environmental problem that we're talking about, right? It goes beyond the free will concept. This environment, like Sophia mentioned in the chat, environment has so much to do with this. Why are we overlooking environment? Now, she wasn't here for a lot of the conversation, I don't think. So, she's just getting the tail end of this, but I talked a lot about that. There have been a number of people on this panel who've referenced the environment is so important. And that's why the environment is so important, because once again, like Scott's saying, what if your partner dies or something happens tragic, which we see this all the time, right? So now we have a single mother or a single father trying to raise kids. You have a partner who goes through a crisis of their own and falls apart mentally. So they're no longer there for the family, even though they might be there physically, so to speak. So many things happen. This is why a community must be responsible for raising the children. We can't just leave it on the parents, right? We have to take this seriously as a community. When we see kids out there, we need to be providing starts with an influence, the type of influence that we're being, right? Because kids are watching. They're watching everything around them. They're paying attention to all the details and how are all the adults behaving. What are the adults getting glorified for? What kind of behaviors are we glorifying in media? Like one of the other people who joined the chat today, and I'm starting to lose track.
AOE.
Yeah.
A put in the private chat, Ace did, that he needed to go, and he wanted to see if he could make a short party message or whatever.
Yes, absolutely, always. So Ace, I'm sorry, brother, I did not pay attention to the private chat. I was on my soapbox here. So let me give the floor to Ace so you can speak uninterrupted, and then be sure to plug your channel and tell people where they can find you. And thank you so much for stopping by.
Well, I have to go. Unfortunately, I'm really enjoying this conversation. I do want to say that I know just this last few message, that last message I had, it could be seen as offensive and disrespectful. I do want to say I have no intention of disrespecting or offending anyone, and I apologize if my words had that effect. And I do agree that type of conversation does need to happen, though. And just one thing to think about before I go, I'll just keep it in 15 seconds. There's a lot of argument about poverty being solved by crime being solved by reducing poverty, but who are the most evil people on earth according to these same individuals? The billionaire class. So they're the ones being evil and committing crimes. So does reducing poverty actually make you a better person and solve these problems? Just something to think about. But I'm going to listen to what other people say, and thank you for having me on.
Always great to have you here, Ace. I appreciate that, you maintain a respectful approach. And I also want to acknowledge all of the people who come onto these open panels. No matter what the panel is, somebody's going to basically be the odd man out, so to speak, and you're kind of get ganged up onto a certain extent. And so I really respect the fact that everybody here was very polite to A's, given the fact that we have these fundamental disagreements. And I appreciate the fact that A's was trying to maintain his own civility as well. We do have some fundamental disagreements, and these issues are polarizing, right? But it's important that we create platforms and environments where we can put this stuff out on the table and expose ourselves and not feel like we're going to get vilified for having different ideas, right? It's important to have different ideas. And at the end of the day, we want to learn to celebrate diversity too, right? Even if it's something we disagree with, we can agree with the fact that there's a beauty in diversity, right? And we always want to look for common ground. So I think, I can't remember where we were at right before we gave that to Ace. So let's just open it up to anybody who wants to speak.
Well, I wanted to steel man Scott's point by basically giving personal experience of my own, is that parents with children with disabilities, they don't sign up for it. It's just happened. It happens, and you have to deal with it. And that's one of the things that it's like life doesn't prepare you for it. It just is. And as a person of like that, that has a permanent disability, cerebral palsy, in the grand scheme of things, I got off easy. As in, I had even if my mother was single and raising my two brothers at the inner holes, but I'm kind of doing like that. And I had my grandparents, and they taught me most of the things that I know. Moralities, most of come from them and my mother too. And we were essentially upper middle class because my mother was a businesswoman and a pharmacist. So that basically gave us a cushion that I basically enjoyed due to the fact that, having all the appointments that need to be done and all that stuff. And also that she was adamant that I had a proper education like everybody else, because a lot of people in that position would basically see those limitations of their children as a barrier to a normal life and a burden, and not everybody would be willing to essentially suck it up and just do what needs to be done for that child or children to thrive or to have the possibility of thriving. And that's basically what I want to say from that. So yeah.
That's really inspirational to hear from somebody who is struggling and is able to look at the positive things that they have going for themselves, because it's really important for us to understand the value of suffering, right? It seems so counterintuitive to say, how could there be any value in something that we consider to be negative? Well, that's why these good and bad is always going to be subjective, right? Nature doesn't have a good and bad. Even suffering technically can't be valued as good as bad. Any value judgment has to be subjective, because the hunger is a type of suffering, right? But what hunger does is it tells us, hey, it's time to eat. And that is a good thing. If we didn't have the hunger, we would starve to death. We'd have no motivation to go get something out of the cupboard. If I don't feel pain when I put my hand on the fire, then I'd be literally burning myself. I'd be caught on fire and I wouldn't care. I'd be like, oh, look, I'm like a glow stick, a human glow stick. And then I would be dead, right? So with suffering, if it leads to a reaction that causes you to say, wait a minute, this is not healthy behavior, this is going to reduce my well-being, reduce our flourishing, then how can we say that this is actually fundamentally bad or fundamentally good even? We have to make those value judgments subjectively. We have to be able to look at our own suffering and say, this is too much, or this has been beneficial because I've learned to overcome it, right? You can't have courage if you don't face your fear. I really respect people who can look at the suffering in their lives and try to find the value in the things that they have, the resources they've been given, or whatever it might be, because that's how you get through these things. That's how you overcome, because otherwise your suffering buries you, right? It buries you in depression. It buries you in anxiety, as well as the physical ailments that we struggle with. So I really respect that, Chris.
Yeah. And I would also go further than that and say, part of the problem is when we try to approach these kind of issues from a very cold, calculating, logical, Dr. Spock kind of way of solving problems. That's not always helpful, because you could say, say obese people, you could easily say, well, basically, if you just do the math, the more calories you take in, the more weight you're going to gain. Therefore, just don't eat. And then you could just kind of sum it all up and say, well, they just eat too much. It's not my problem. It's their choice. They're making the wrong choice. So screw them. But that's not really, and that's kind of technically true, technically, logically. Yep. But the problem is you're dealing with human beings. We have to figure out a way to make them want to take in less calories. How do you get them to that point? There's ways to do that. And yeah, it takes intervention. It takes, some sort of plan and some sort of expertise to apply to that problem. And others would just kind of scoff at it and say, why do we have to go through so much trouble to make these big people stop eating so much? Just stop eating. But what they don't understand is that a lot of it's like Objective Ethics just said a few minutes ago, we are all connected. We're all one thing. So when I help my brother in need, I'm sort of helping myself. If we see all this societal breakdown and nobody's really being reformed when they go into prison, when they come out, we're dealing with monsters. So why would we want to deal with monsters when we can just fix the problem to begin with? So those are the things we need to how can we do that? Let's focus on doing that, because it's not just as easy as these Dr. Spock logical answers. It's like there's more to it.
Mm-hmm. And also, just to let you guys know, of the other cushion is societal, as in the community, as in the healthcare that was afforded to my family as universal, as single payer. Essentially, yes, my mother did foot some part of the bill, but it's basically like elective stuff. But for the most part, like say physio, personal support worker, or stuff like that, those were essentially afforded to me by, well, if you want to say the state or the province where I am, due to the fact that I had a diagnosis of that stuff. And also it's like, and they're like, sorry, what I'm saying is that there was no, there was pressure alleviated from my mother that the state took on so that she could, be more, not free, but had less worries to, take care of me and any other problems my brothers had as they grew up. So, yeah.
Can I say something? I just want, I wanted, if Age is out there listening, I didn't want Age to feel like I was attacking, just like this sex education thing. It's like I'm old person, so I've been in I thought that everybody knew that we did not do sex education properly in this country, and I guess I assume that people, because that we don't do that. We have young children, 10, 12, 13 years old, getting pregnant, and some of them don't even know how they get pregnant. They don't even know how they ended up pregnant, so they don't even know what. And in Kentucky, we don't have good sex education. In other states like my state, we don't do that. We just don't. It's really sad. And thank y'all for not, at least y'all are not calling for public flogging like Claire wants to do about my out of wedlock children. Yeah, great idea. That's a great idea, Claire.
And to for me to just address what Scott is saying, about with the whole obesity thing, it's sure, we could reduce it to just down to numbers, logically, but it's then we're just ignoring every other factor that plays into that, why is it that there's so many obese people in the United States? It's like, and we could say, oh well, people are just being lazy, but then we can also look at the statistics and see that healthier foods cost nearly twice as much as unhealthier foods per serving on average. So it's like if you're subsidizing,
if they have them at all now, like some places are like a desert.
Yeah, food deserts, one thing. Yeah. And so like if you are subsidizing junk food, and you already have this cycle of poverty where it's so hard to get out of poverty. Well, it's no wonder people who are in poverty are more likely to be obese. It's not some moral character flaw. It's all these other factors that play into it.
It's always easier to blame people, and it also feels good to blame people because our egos like that inflation. We like to feel supreme over somebody else. So of course we like to make derogatory judgments against groups of people because like laziness can sometimes be really just an interpretation of behavior rather than an explanation of it, right? And that's my whole point, is that someone may struggle with planning, initiation, attention, regulation, organization because of mental situations, or depression, or a lot of other factors, man, that play a role in that. I mean, some people thought I was lazy for a time, but it was because I was suffering my anxiety. It was hard for me to even get up and take a damn shower. And it wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because I didn't know how to get out of bed. I didn't know how to do a lot of things. And it took a lot of encouragement from family and friends to help me through that problem I was having a few years ago. And I learned firsthand that I'm not a lazy person. I thought I was, and I was kicking myself for it. But then now I'm like, I wasn't lazy. I was obviously not in my right mind at the time,
Which just goes back to that broader point of just how unserious we handle mental health in this country. Like, it goes back to the point of, humans love to just label all these things as moral failings. Like, you can look into this. It's like, being schizophrenic, having epilepsy. But sure, now we treat them as serious mental illnesses, but it's like that used to be placed as either a moral failing on the person themselves or a moral failing on the parents.
The biggest person that was accusing me of moral failings was myself. In fact, that was what was increasing my depression more and more, because I felt bad that I was being lazy. And then it was just a cycle I was going through, and it was hard to break out of that because I felt so bad. I wanted to do stuff, but I couldn't do it. And that just added to my depression and anxiety because I had bills and I was being a problem on other people. And but it took a lot of reflection, looking at what led me down that road. I almost, committed self-deletion. A lot of things I was going through, but I was dealing with a lot of crap. And was the system there to help me? Not really. I went to talk to somebody and I tried to explain how I was feeling. They almost put me in a what do they call it? It was some kind of facility where I would be isolated.
Asylum?
Asylum. Yeah, they were going to put me in an asylum for at least a year. That was what they wanted me to sign a paper. And how was I going to take care of my children? Right. And then the system would have failed my children. Then my children would have been sent to a foster home. Then they'd have went through all that process, which would have led them down possibly bad situations that would have led them to be some of these kids that make bad decisions coming up, maybe even criminal behavior. Who knows? I didn't want to see my kids go through that. I didn't want to see that. So I just had to rely on friends and stuff like that to get through it. And I was just kind of lucky. But imagine I'm just one person. There's like millions of people in this country go through.
There's so much Just really quickly before it gets too far away, because the conversation tends to so many people are putting so many ideas on the table, and I want to make sure that we have some complete thoughts here. Nell, you talked about we were talking about the diet and the obesity, right? And Nell, I think this actually touches on something that you had brought up at the very, very beginning when you joined us, and it talked about corporate responsibility, right? When McDonald's is literally feeding people poison, they have millions of dollars to hire the most successful athletes to promote this product, right? So there is this influence that we've been talking about through media marketing that literally promotes this billion-dollar corporation to poison people, and it's very effective, right? Where's the moral efficacy in what they're doing? And it feeds into this problem of obesity. It's directly connected. I'd also like to touch on what Scott was saying earlier, because this is not pushback on what you said, but it's more clarification from my perspective anyway. When you said that we want to be, propped up and we want to this, I think this is the ego talking, and we all have an ego, and we all need to find the balance, right? You guys hear me talk about this all the time. I mentioned it several times today with the middle way and the golden mean, Aristotelian golden mean. Humility is that a perfect medium between ego and self-deprivation, right? So yes, we do have this ego, and the ego serves a purpose for us biologically, right? It keeps us surviving. It lets us know, like as Scott has said before, what mouth do we put the fork in, right? If I don't feed myself, then I'm in no position to feed anybody else, right? So it's not to say that the ego is inherently this terrible thing, and the ego does cause us to want to be glorified when we step on the other guy as we're climbing up the corporate ladder or whatever. But when we have a proper understanding of what actually we really want, this is where reason comes into play, right? What provides me a good life is mutual respect for you and for myself. That's what I really want. The ego tells me I want something else. And when I go strive for that, I end up not only not getting what I want, but I end up getting what I don't want, which is lack of self-respect. And I keep going after this, and I just dig myself into a deeper pit because I'm going after this mirage. I'm out in the desert trying to eat dry sand because the heat waves is telling me this is water, right? I'm at an oasis, but it turns out that there's nothing there that's going to sustain myself and give me what I truly need, which is self-respect. That's the good life that I want to live. So it's really important that I clarify, I think, because I think you would agree with me on that. It's not to say that we all want to step on everybody and be propped up. The ego tells us, an uncontrolled ego leads us to that, but that's a confusion, right? That's a misunderstanding. And I do think it's also important to highlight what Chris is talking about here, Bionic Latino, it's collectivism. Collectivism, when we start to ascribe labels to things, it gets really sticky because we end up getting painted into a corner that we may not necessarily ascribe to, because life is really nuanced, right? So I do believe in a collective good for all people. However, collectivism is actually technically speaking, it's a type of either philosophical or political position. And I think the most effective political position is actually a balance between socialism and capitalism. Right? It's not one or the other, but I think we need to learn to merge the two successfully. Capitalism drives economies and it drives market value and things of this nature much more effectively than communist or socialism does. However, just going strictly capitalist, like maybe Ayn Rand would suggest, leaves people hanging. We don't have healthcare. We don't have public education, things of that nature. Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, like back after World War II, when after following when the Great Depression, we came out of that and everything, we started correcting some of this. We started regulating capitalism. We started regulating this, and I kind of agree with you about that. But then I see capitalism as just so predatory. Because it's so, but I think probably all systems are pretty easy to corrupt. But and so I think that, so I'm fine with leaving our economic system sort of based on that, but laissez-faire. Like a lot of people in our society want laissez-faire capitalism. And laissez-faire capitalism is just so predatory, and it is so negative of the humans in the society. And so we have, I don't want to blame this on any one party, but we have a party though that has spent years of deregulation. They have spent years of like propping up the ideal that this personal property, it matters more than anything else. That personal, wealth and everything and that billionaires have worked hard to acquire their money and stuff like that. And we have so many poor people now who are voting for billionaires who because they're like, and they defend them, and it makes no sense. And we need to go back to a time when we started taxing this wealth more appropriately, and we saw a general growth, in like the wealth difference was closing in, the gap was closing in, and it was getting better. And then we've allowed in the last few years for them to go in and just destroy everything that we pretty much worked for during those years. And now the wealth gap is growing again. And it's and crime had started fall. I mean, it takes years for these to see the effects of these things. And so by the time now 20 years from now, like Roe v. Wade, when Roe v. Wade was passed back in 1973, 20 years after Roe v. Wade, we saw a huge decrease in crime. You know what I mean? And like a whole lot of studies have been done to show that a lot of it was a result of that, right? Women not being forced to give birth to children they couldn't afford to raise. And I predict that 20 years from now, we'll see an increase. And but it's hard to convince people of it, because a lot of people expect immediate results of things, and that's not how societies work.
No, and I forget who brought it up, but they really, I think, hammered the point with just particularly the U.S., where we've become, I would say, hyper individualistic. And as a leftist, I will tend to focus on systems and the collective, and it's that sometimes sounds like I'm trying to avoid personal responsibility, but as I try to say, though, that we on the individual level, we also have responsibilities. But to me, it seems like we like, what I try to remind people is that even though there is that personal responsibility, we tend to forget that more times than not, things are usually out of our control. We don't have that much control over our lives. There are all these external factors that play into the type of person we become.
It's also good to kind of look at the facts, because a lot of what we hear in the news and on social media and just general discussion about these things, like Democrats versus Republicans, like while it's true that you hear more talk of deregulation from Republicans than Democrats, what I've found just through, because I had some of these topics discussed with me recently with my family, actually, what we kind of found out by all searching through this stuff all together is that over the last 20 years was our little gauge, is that Republicans have generally pursued more active deregulation agendas, like as far as what they run on, like their messaging. But as it turns out, Democrats and Republicans are probably even, as it turned out. So despite their differences, both parties have actually participated in deregulation. and the overall regulatory system has continued to grow across multiple administrations, Republican or not. So I think what's going on is, you know, they respond to their voter base, and they also respond to how they can make money. And, you know, everybody wants money, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. They don't care. It's like they'll, you know, like Republicans are just hypocrites. They'll say, yeah, we are for deregulation. And then you find out they're actually regulating a lot of things that you're not really aware of. And they're making money from that regulation. And then they accuse Democrats of doing that. Well, Democrats are just doing what they're doing. You know, it's just that they're just kind of popular for it. You know what I mean?
let me. I just want to say that, like, we have two people like to say the right and the left, and like if you base our political system on the world stage, we don't have a left party.
No.
We have, you know, the Democrats are like a center right sort of by all of the other world standards, and Republicans are a far right party by the state. So
That's
they're
exactly
not.
what we found. Yep.
So yeah, there is no. We have no left. We don't have any. Like, and people want to say, "Oh, the radical left." We don't have any of those people in Congress. Like, you know, Bernie Sanders, AOC would be two of the furthest left people that we have, and they are. And Bernie is still a capitalist. So like, so there is no far left. There may be some far left voters, but there is not a far left party. And most of what I'm talking about as far as the deregulation and stuff is a lot of it's come from the Supreme Court. A lot of it's not even being done through the legislative branch. You know, a lot of that Supreme Court has ruled. A lot of that they have allowed. You know, and both parties are controlled by lobbyists. So we need to get lobbyists out of our legislation, and so maybe they'll start doing stuff for us again instead of.
Hope so.
Yeah,
I mean, like some of the largest environmental things that were passed were under Nixon, who was a Republican. You know, because the rivers were on fire at that time, and so yeah, he had to do something. So. And they rolled most of that back.
Well, like one of the things that I don't understand technically about like legislation, well, not legislation, but judicial rulings like Roe v. Wade and Obergefell and even the Civil Rights Acts, in a way, is that they, well, not the Civil Rights Act, but Obergefell and at least Roe v. Wade are not codified by the Constitution. Well, I'd say Constitution, but amendment. There's not been an amendment for those, as far as I understand, and that basically opened the door for them to be struck down and viewed as an opinion. And if at the time they put in an amendment, people would have been basically, the conservatives would have been a bit more, having more roadblocks of striking those things down, and just basically having the culture being more reluctant to tear those rights away. Am I just like shooting stuff in the dark over here, or am I making sense?
Yeah, actually though, Roe v. Wade was ruled on by a conservative court, so it was a majority conservative court that passed Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
Yeah, and at that time,
sorry.
No, they never did. They never did put it in the legislature. In 50 years, they had it because but like, and at that time, even the Southern Baptist Convention wrote a letter, an amicus brief, which is like a friend of the court brief, you know, to the court. I don't, if you know anything about like amicus briefs are like interesting parties that have an interest in the case can get a lawyer and have them write a brief, and it will like have a recommendation to the court, and the justices sometimes consider these, but it is a common thing. So there were a lot of amicus briefs that came in from religious institutions when Roe v. Wade was ruled on, and Southern Baptist Convention was one of them. It wrote in support of it. But like Roe v. Wade, the problem with it was after it passed and everything, that's when they stopped allowing religion, like they stopped allowing white schools to discriminate against allowing black students into to enroll, and so they lost the segregation issue, and so then they had to find something to get their base right up again. So they chose abortion, and that's when they went around church to church to church and convinced people that abortion was immoral and stuff. And, it's a whole campaign of just propaganda and shit that started what that we had to see today.
Robin knows her history, but and to get to your point, Chris, there should have been more guardrails in place, but even if we had gotten Roe v. Wade codified into federal law, that wouldn't have protected it from the conservative Supreme Court, because then they could have someone could have challenged it at the law as unconstitutional. Really the only way to get abortion rights protected, ironclad, would be a constitutional amendment. But getting one of those passed, well, that's an entirely different story.
I'd like to probably have to start winding this down so I could get some other things done with my day. I've so much enjoyed the conversation. We've gone to a lot of different places, and I would like to wind this down in a direction towards the actual topic of the show. And I think a lot of this stuff can be tied into the topic of the justice system and finding solutions for that. What I'd like to do, is I'd like to give, as I always do, each person a chance to speak uninterrupted, to give each person the floor. And I'd like to have you take as much time, because we're not in a hurry here. Take as much time as you can to kind of collect your ideas that you've introduced into the conversation, and see if you could tie that back to a potential solution to the problem that's at hand here with the justice system, in particular in North America, right? So maybe we could figure out solutions that can offer a global solution that other countries can look at. I mean, maybe highlight what Norway is doing, for example, right? And more effective rehabilitation. To close this up on the topic of the politics at hand, when I talk about balance, I think that's what's most important, in my opinion. And I think it really comes down to balance, because I think you could look at both sides. Like what Robin's talking about is absolutely right. Unchecked capitalism leads to predatory behavior, right? It becomes a race to the top. And there is a momentum in economics. It's called market trend, right? And so we see this with the most successful corporations, right? And once the corporations, the McDonald's, the Walmarts, once these guys become successful enough, the small guy in a capitalistic, unchecked, unfettered capitalistic system has literally no chance, because all the momentum is against them, right? On the other side of that, unchecked, just pure mandated collectivism takes away risks taking away, and leads to removing personal autonomy, right? And we don't want to do that. Even though we want to help the group, we don't want to do it at the expense of sacrificing individual autonomy. So the individual must be valued, but that value for the individual has to be in their own ability, their own capacity to basically make their own way, right? So trying to get these two married together, it only happens with balance, in my opinion. I think that Robin touched on a couple of things that were really important, which he talked about Roe v. Wade and the effect that actually had on the crime rate. Children being born into families that couldn't raise them, that couldn't afford to give them a good life, right? So now these children are growing up in poverty, and they're seeing the drug dealer on the corner who's got a big fat wad of cash in his pocket, and that becomes a temptation because they don't have any resources, right? They've got holes in their clothes. They don't have a sandwich in their lunchbox. It's empty. So now what are they going to be more likely to do? It doesn't mean they have to go start being a drug dealer, right? But their chances are they're going to be leaning in these directions, right? We're raising criminals. The other issue is we saw when the war on drugs, Reagan's war on drugs, right? That also increased the incarceration rate. The crime rate went up when we started, when we engaged in this domestic war on drugs. It became a war against ourselves, right? It became a war against the poor people. It became a war against the poor neighborhoods, which inherently became a war against people of color and underprivileged white people, even, right? So the underprivileged now became like a domestic terrorist, so to speak, because it's just literally one bad decision leading to another bad outcome. And instead of looking at that and fixing it, we make another bad decision, and it becomes an exponential problem of bad outcomes. And now we have a reincarceration rate, a recidivism rate of 77% within 5 years in our criminal justice system. So I'm trying to tie all this back together. We're going to go ahead and just give everybody a chance to have their own thoughts. And again, take as much time as you'd like. I'd like to go Chris, Scott, Nell, and Robin. I'll have you go last. And so maybe we'll do it. I'm trying to think of who joined here. Nell, we'll go Chris, Nell, Scott, and Robin, I think. What the hell? So Chris, you'll have the floor first and take as much time as you'd like to give your own thoughts. Try to bring this to the justice system and any potential solutions, or maybe highlight some problems we haven't discussed yet.
Okay. Well, I'll be brief. In my mind, I think it's more important to emphasize rehabilitation, but that's just my personal opinion. And going through like the strings of poverty, you basically affordable housing, and inflation needs to be dealt with. There's also the fact that the Portuguese model to use for drug abuses and to those social like the social way to deal with drugs in the streets and stuff like that is to have safe injection sites, and also for that type of thing. But I know that it's a lot of things, but it's basically you have to basically check the Portuguese model of those issues, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, homelessness too, but it's all tied together with basically inflation and how affordable housing and like other stuff too. So economic stuff. Yeah. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for having me. And yeah.
Oh, thank you for being here. You guys on the panel, you all make this show what it is, and you add so much value to it. Despite any agreements or disagreements we might have, and that goes for A's as well, for being a part of this. The show is really built around all of you, and I really appreciate your participation. Now, why don't you go ahead and go next?
All right. So when it comes to dealing with the justice system issue, to me, it's we have to deal with it holistically. So, sure, we need to, when it comes to the prison system, we need to take the profit motive out of the private, just get rid of private prisons altogether. We need to, instead of trying to punish people, we need to focus more on rehabilitation and reintegration back into society. But it goes beyond that. We need to, like many have stated, we need to tackle poverty. We need to give people a living wage, and what might that look like? Well, we could tie the wage to the cost of living in a specific area and tie it to inflation. We can bring back unions so that we can bring back collective bargaining, so that we're not just victims to a minimum wage. We can give universal basic income as well as a solution. We can do universal healthcare, socialized medicine, universal higher education, comprehensive sex education, protecting women's rights, abortion, and when it comes to the prison systems with trans rights, it's like trans women are being forced into men's prisons, and that puts their entire lives in danger. So, and I don't want to be there. It seems like there's this stereotype of the trans person is bringing up trans issues. Well, I wouldn't have to bring up trans issues if there wasn't a political party trying to erase my existence. Well, I'll just stop there with that. And then, so yeah, it's this holistic approach, like, and we need to stop seeing poverty as a moral failing. We need to stop tying our entire worth to our job. Like if you lose your job, you don't deserve to die. Like, to me, it's just wild to me that we allow people to go become homeless due to a loss of job. Like, that to me is the moral failing, the societal moral failing. So I look to countries in Europe, especially the Scandinavian countries, and look at just how strong their welfare systems are. It's like, I wish we could take a few examples from them and apply that here. And then I guess one more thing, that got touched upon slightly, but when it comes to the prison systems, the whole systemic racism issue, it's like, Nixon was a very mixed bag, and one of the terrible things that he did was, help flood the Black communities with crack cocaine. It's like, and try to get them into prisons. It's Black communities, Hispanic communities, they're disproportionately affected by the prison system, and that should also be recognized. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, there was a lot brought up, excuse me, in this conversation today. Some of it pretty unrelated to the overall topic, and that's perfectly fine. But one of the things that the problem with that is that we don't necessarily get to flesh out all these talking points, right? Like we should. And a conversation does need to be had about some of the things that Ace was talking about. And this is not to vilify Ace when he's not here to defend himself, just to bring up the talking points that were raised. When the talking point was raised that, trans people shouldn't be allowed in the military, was his perception that they all have this mental or emotional maladjustment or something, I think was the position. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. I'm trying to think back at how he phrased it. But I think it's really I know there are other people, if not Ace specifically, that will say, trans people are mentally inhibited, or emotionally inhibited, so they shouldn't be allowed to own guns. I know Trump was trying to say that, right? That meant that trans people should not be allowed to have a concealed weapons permit or to have a gun license. But what these people are not recognizing, and it really frustrates me, because the truth of the matter is, if you're constantly telling somebody you're not living in the real world, you're not accepting reality, when what they're actually doing is denying real science behind transgenderism, and they're denying a person's lived experience, setting everything else aside, right? We all have our own personal lived experience. And so when other people are basically criticizing our own lived experience, is that not going to feed into our own instability emotionally and mentally? I mean, it break me down. It did break me down as somebody who grew up in poverty, as somebody who lived in the streets, as an ex-con who had to be tagged as a criminal for my entire life, right? Who was forced, essentially, if I wanted to live a good life financially, I had to figure out a way to do it for myself legally without any support around me because of my past bad decisions, which I made, and I have to take responsibility for that. If people continuously hound on you, it affects your mental stability. I don't care who you are. Every one of us has made mistakes. Every one of us has been put into a bad situation at one point or another. And so if we're being attacked because of things that are out of our control or things that we're trying to do better, and we never are given an equal opportunity to succeed, of course it's going to feed into these issues. So I feel like it's so disingenuous to say, oh, trans people have mental issues or emotional problems, so they shouldn't be allowed to serve in the military and defend their country. That's just so unfair, and it's so disingenuous in my opinion. And I think you handled that very well. Now, it's always difficult, just like it's difficult for Ace to be the only religious person on the panel. We got to give him credit for that as well, right? Credit where credit's due. It's difficult for you to be the only transgender person on the panel, right? It's not fair to be in the minority in any situation, to be marginalized or part of a marginalized group, right? So I really commend you for the strength that you showed, the strength of character that you showed in letting stuff roll off your back and just writing it off to other people's ignorance and stuff. Because at the end of the day, we are ultimately responsible for our own well-being, like Scott was talking about earlier, right? It was when he finally figured out that he's the one who's got to hold himself accountable to his own mindset and his own approach to life. That's what got him on the right track. And I agree with what Scott said 100%. What got me to turn my life around when I was sitting in a jail cell for the umpteenth time, like, why do I keep coming back here? I had to say, wait a minute. I have been making this terrible error my whole life. What I was doing was I was blaming myself for all these things that I had no control over. My father's got murdered. I blame myself somehow for that. All these divorces, these broken homes that I went through as a child, I was blaming myself for that. I was carrying so much guilt for being a street kid and for the things that I did as a result of being a vulnerable child on the streets, right, to survive. And I was blaming myself for all these things that were really out of my control. On the flip side of that, what I wasn't doing was taking responsibility for what was in my control, right? I was making excuses. Every time I had a choice to make and I made the wrong choice, I would write it off to something. Oh, it's not my fault because I'm a street kid. It's not my fault because I had so many bad things happen, blah, blah, blah. Well, I did have a choice to make and I made bad choices. And because I made bad choices, I experienced bad results. Once you get this mindset, right, like what Scott and I are talking about here, once you get your mind fixed and you learn to accept responsibility for your own choices, free yourself of unnecessary guilt that you shouldn't be carrying, you give yourself so much more ability to actually face life and to turn things around. It's got to happen within yourself. We need a system around us, but you've got to put the work in, right? So,
yep. And I appreciate the kind words. The only thing I would say is, instead of, because you use the word transgenderism, and so I would just try to replace that word with trans people, because to me, like, I feel like transgenderism, that seems to be a big right-wing talking point. Like, they're trying to replace us with an ideology. It's like, I'm not an ideology. I'm a real human being with feelings and an experience and all these things that come with the human experience. So.
No, I appreciate the correction. Because I am ignorant about a lot of things. So now tell me again. I understand the ism. What would to replace it with? What then?
With just trans people.
Trans people. Gotcha. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you very much for the correction, and I will try to apply that moving forward. Really appreciate you for that.
I would like to just add that no, you don't need. Well, in my mind, you don't need to feel guilty of bringing transgender issues on the panel, just because it's the same thing with me, with being the only person with a physical permanent disability, that every time I basically come on this panel, that basically I have to remind people that basically we exist, and most of the ideologies do not stand muster, because it's not inclusive to my part of the sector of society that I am a part of. So just to let you know that you don't need to feel guilty over that. So
thanks.
Okay, Scott, we're going to go to you next, and I appreciate everyone's patience here. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you guys also finding a way to bring it back to the justice system, which is the topic of the show tonight. But don't feel like you are in a hurry or anything like that. All the input's been really valuable today.
Yeah, so just re-emphasizing what Objective Ethics and Nell just said, a holistic approach is always going to be my go-to as a non-dualist anyways. Top down, bottom up, both of them. Why not? Because you see, the thing about it is, like I always say, responsibility without support becomes punishment. And then support without responsibility, though, becomes dependency. So productive societies should try to hold both in some kind of tension or in balance. So it's all about a balance. And I like what you guys were talking about with the labeling stuff that promotes even further exasperation of the problem. I know you were kind of applying it to other things, but even when we tie it back into prison reform and criminality coming out, there is this thing in psychology called the looping effect and labeling theory and self-fulfilling prophecy, or iatrogenesis is what it's called. Iatrogenesis is what it's called. And it basically refers to the harm caused by diagnosing people or labeling people a patient. It causes harm. It causes mental health issues because the patient is told so much that they have this chronic or biological problem or brain disease or judgment against their character, that it will actually induce feelings of hopelessness, lack of free choice or free will, that will just cause them to give up and just give in to having no restraint on their behavior, because after all, I'm labeled this way, and so they kind of give themselves that pass. Was it Ian Hacking? He was the one that kind of made that popular. He referred specifically to how human beings react to being classified. So, it just changes behavior. The more humans are aware, because they're self-aware. So when a new label comes out and it's applied to people, those individuals will alter their self-perception, and their behavior is going to fit their parameters of that label, and they essentially create their own subjective reality in the world, and then they start to experience a negative life because they are living it. It's being expressed through them. And part of this is because they've just accepted the labels that society or professionals have actually put on them. So we have to fix that. But like I said, I like the holistic view. I like that bottom-up approach of responsibility, but I also like the top-down, to give you the condition, to give you the opportunity to learn more and everything like that. And we don't live in a perfect society. There's always going to be people that ain't just going to do right. And that's why we have prisons and stuff like that. But the overall thing is that we're not there to punish and exact vengeance. It should be there to increase society. That's my value. The question is, does society really harbor this value? You know what I'm saying? And that's where I think the bottom up stuff comes in. That's when we have to sort of support that through, having, when you decide to have children, have a partner, a stable relationship, a stable partner in the home, so that child has two parents, is taken care of materially. You have to have all those basics taken care of, at least, to give that kid a fighting chance that they don't end up through the system like that, right? So a lot of prevention, is going to go a long way. And also, like Nell was saying, or I don't know who said it, but about the laws, making all these new laws also is a problem. It's like if you made drinking water a crime, guess what? That crime rate is going to shoot right up, right? So let's not make stupid laws against stupid things that aren't really crimes. Let's try to be thoughtful about the kind of laws we support and don't. But anyways, that's all I had to say on that.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And before I respond to it, which I do have a couple of thoughts, of course, but I noticed somebody else has joined the back panel. Spiritual Glitch, you're always welcome here. The reason I'm not going to bring you up this time is because we're actually winding it down and we're just about finished with our closing remarks. And I don't want to start a whole nother rabbit hole potentially. So you're welcome to jump back into the chat. And if you post a comment in the chat and it's relative, I'll read it out to the group in my closing statements if you'd like to do that. I just don't want you to feel like you're being ignored back there and you're not valued, because everyone here is of equal value. But I just can't, it'll just derail the direction we're going right now to just bring people up onto the panel at this point. But I do appreciate you stopping by. So like I said, if you have something that you really want to contribute to the conversation, jump back into the chat, post your comment. And if it's relative to the prison system and what we've been talking about, I'll read it out to the group. Okay. I'll highlight it. Scott, as far as what you said there, I do, really do value your input and your participation. It was so nice to see Sophia stop by today as well. I would have loved it if she'd have come up here, because I know she would have had a lot of really great insight into this conversation. One of the things that got really I don't know if I should say overlooked. I tried to highlight it as much as possible, especially at the beginning, and we did touch on it to a certain degree. But I think the external influences are so important. That's one of the comments that Sophia has talked about, and we really need to be mindful of that, because it ties into like what you were saying with the laws. Are the laws making things better, or are making things actually worse, right? And I think that we've highlighted a couple, like Robin brought up Roe v. Wade. I brought up the war on drugs, as a couple of examples of where we can see this. So it's intentionality, right? What is the intention behind all these things? Are we trying to solve a problem? Or are we putting a Band-Aid on it? Or are we actually making a problem, knowingly making a problem worse? Like when what Nell brought up with Nixon and introducing crack cocaine into the low-income communities. That specifically was going to, in an unbalanced way, that's not the best word for it, but in an unbalanced way, it's going to affect people of color, right? Because more people of color are living in these poor communities. And so it's when you sit back from the situation and say, well, obviously, we literally made this problem. We flooded our prison system with people of color. And now 3 decades later, after doing this, there are people on the conservative people who are saying, look, all the people of color are the problem. They're the ones always going into jail, in and out of jail. Well, we also see that jails have revolving doors. And so it just perpetuates that mindset. And it turns out that we created that problem in the first place, right? And I think that's one of the common threads that everybody's talked about. And the studies do verify this talking point, is it comes down to economics and economic efficacy, right? And financial viability. If you're coming from a low income situation, your chances of ending up in the justice system in the first place is significantly higher than if you grow up with resources, right? If you grow up in a 2-parent household, those things have a huge effect on whether or not somebody even goes into the justice system in the first place. So before we could even fix the justice system, we got to figure out how to keep people from going in there, right? Then we have to say, okay, what are we going to do about the people who are going in there? How are we going to stop them from going back and just continue to go back? So I like a lot of the things that you brought up today. And I think you're looking for solutions like I am. And I really appreciate your participation as always. Okay,
Thank
sister, you've got the final word for the panel here, and then I'll give a closing statement, Robin. And I just want to say before you start, again, how much I appreciate your participation and some of the things you brought up, the history. As Nell said, you are very knowledgeable, and we appreciate you sharing that knowledge with us.
Thank you very much. I was going to tell Chris that what I said to Neil about pain burn, that goes for you too. So, and yes, I was glad to see Sophia. It's always good to see Sophia. Yeah. All right. I think like we have a everything in the United States is for profit. It's not, not for our society, not necessarily to benefit our society or our communities, but for profit. And like prisons is no difference. We have for-profit prisons, which means that if the more people that you have arrested and locked up in your prison, the more money you're making. And so I would say that that's an interest problem there. When you actually are benefiting from more incarcerations, it kind of seems to trickle down that you're going to see more incarcerations, because if nothing else, the people that own these prisons, who are the ones that are elected, are pushing to elect people who will incarcerate more often. So, and it seems so weird to me, and I guess like some of these things, I think I assume that they are just known by everybody, and I guess that's not true. But like so we need to do something about the for-profit prison system. That's just that is not in the best interest of our communities to have people getting rich over incarceration of our citizens. We know that, like you were talking about, the war on drugs. Okay, the drugs won, by the way. On the war on drugs was just exactly back to what I'd said earlier about the incarceration of crack cocaine, people who were caught possessing crack cocaine over powder cocaine, and so it was specifically aimed that way because the crack cocaine was found more predominantly in African American communities, and powder cocaine was more of a white people's issue, I guess. And I mean, that's a generalization, but it is like a statistic that is pretty correct. I mean, like, it's not all, but and so I would say that, and a lot of that was we know that incarcerating people at higher rates keeps them in poverty. It keeps them in poverty. We created a lot of single parent young people in the African American communities through this tactic, and plus we took away their voting rights. That as an extra benefit, according to a lot of people. So it was an intentional thing. It wasn't as much of the war on drugs as it was the war on a specific group, and they used the war on drugs to get to that goal. And I think we see now that it largely worked. I mean, we didn't do anything about drugs, but we certainly did cause a lot of poverty and like single parents and stuff. And that's single parents lead to poverty. Yes, I agree with that. I don't think that means that we should ban out like the one party right now wants to get rid of no fault divorce to fix that problem, which is absolutely like so wrong. We should educate children on how you get pregnant and how to prevent getting pregnant, and what the benefits of waiting and planning for pregnancy are. And we should empower women to make better choices about that, and so they don't look for a man right out of teenage years or in high school when they get out to support them, because they know they've got a choice, an option to do something with their life besides just get married and start reproducing children. Let's see, I've got some notes here and I'm trying to read them. Let's see. Oh, and about transgender people. I think that it's really hard for people I think everybody should be able to serve in the military, and I don't think anybody should have to. But like, I have a very good friend who is a trans man who actually went through medical school and was paid for it in the Army. And he just graduated, and just as soon as he graduated is when Trump got elected, and now they have thrown him out. So I guess in a way it kind of like worked out good in his favor. They paid for all of his medical school. He doesn't owe anybody any money back for his education and stuff. But we as taxpayers spent all of that money, like, educating him to be a physician, and then we kicked him out of the military as soon as he graduated for this. So this is like shooting yourself in the foot. Just that we just keep on shooting ourselves in the foot. And we need to remember, I think, that free will is not as free as we like to pretend it is when we're incarcerating people. And that doesn't mean that we should not put people in prison for committing crimes. But I think that we need to put them in there more as with a goal of trying to help them come to better education and stuff like that, goes to where when they come back out, they don't re-enter the system again. but not as much punishment. And that's I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in our society, is seeing prison as a punishment, or seeing it as something to help rehabilitate that person into a better life. And I think we need to do something about our for-profit prisons. I think we're never going to be able to have any kind of effective system as long as we are allowing people to get rich off of incarcerating our citizens. That's all. Thank you.
As always, I just really value and appreciate your input, Robin. You touched on some things that are really important, and I want to highlight so much of what you said there. But before I do, I want to, thank Spiritual Glitch. I really appreciate your kind remark that you left in the back chat and understanding the position I'm in, trying to host this show and kind of keep things linear. And I do welcome you to come join us for a conversation next time. I stream every Sunday. I do an open panel, even when I have a guest speaker. The show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern. I try to be pretty on time with that. So please do come back and join us again. I'd love to find out more about your name, Spiritual Glitch. That's really interesting to me. We do talk about a religion on this channel, and philosophy. So I'm sure you'd have a lot to offer a conversation like that. We had Ducks showed up here. Better late than never, Ducks. It's always great to have you. I just really have enjoyed Ducks. A lot of people probably know who Ducks Y is. I see you on a lot of different channels. Ducks, I don't know if you know this or not, but I mentioned earlier that Nobody on Fire and I are going to be on Sarah's channel on the Raging Tomato doing a debate this month about morality without God. So I know I see you on Sarah's channel quite a bit. So you might want to, I think you might enjoy that debate a lot. I want to highlight just a couple of comments that were made here because it's relative. Let's see here. I want to start with, since I mentioned Duck, let's point this up here. He says, yeah, I think politically recognizing that criminal or criminality is not human nature. It is about social mechanisms. It's acknowledging that society affects people. That's absolutely brilliant. He's absolutely right about that. It is, remember that good and bad is a value judgment, and all value judgments are subjective, right? So we create this structure. So criminal and criminality is not a natural mechanism. It's something that we impose onto society. So we need to really look at fundamentally, what are we criminalizing and why are we criminalizing it, right? Another comment I'd like to point to is something that Scott said. I think this is really important here. This is maybe one of my favorite things that I've seen today, and there have been so many wonderful things said today, but I really want to highlight this. One idea, Scott says, is to incentivize private prisons to make productive citizens. Doesn't that sound like an interesting solution, right? Now I think that we could do this with all prisons, not just private prisons, right? I think the solution is to get rid of private prisons, to be honest with you. I think that just opens the door to too many problems. But incentivizing all prisons to produce productive citizens. How effectively are we rehabilitating people, right? Then we can look at each different prison and say, wait a minute, your recidivity rate is 77%, right? If you have a 77% rate of recidivity, then what are you doing wrong? Whereas this prison over here only has 20%, right? And we can look at what they're doing differently and what programs are being offered. What this can give us a great indicator of corruption, how much corruption has found its way into this particular prison. I mean, this is a really great point, and I'm so glad that Scott mentioned this. Was there anything else I wanted to highlight? There's been some good comments left here. I'll let you guys go through the chat yourselves. Okay, so I do want to talk about something that Robin had mentioned, and I think it's probably one of the most important things here because it ties into the poverty thing. I think we've seen that as being statistically, I'm having a hard time talking all of a sudden. I don't know. It's probably going to be like my lunchtime. Statistically, I can't even say recidivity anymore. What the fuck? Oh my God. I laugh at myself. If you don't laugh at yourself, right, then you're going to be really hurt when other people start laughing at you. So when we talk about, rehabilitating criminals, the perpetuity of criminals, of criminality and stuff, we see the economics have so much to do with this, right? Well, education is a huge factor. And Robin touched on this when she talked about sex education, how important that really is to reducing unwanted pregnancies. The number one way to reduce unwanted pregnancies is really educating people on what pregnancy is, what it leads to, what it means to have to raise a child, the costs involved, the sacrifices involved, if you're going to take it seriously, how you get pregnant in the first place. Education in all these areas, a really comprehensive and complete education, will be a great way to reduce these unwanted pregnancies, right? Not criminalizing abortion, obviously, is going to be a huge way to reduce unwanted pregnancies, right? Forcing people to have children they have no intention or ability to raise or to provide a good life for literally makes no sense, because the victim is the child. The pro-life group that wants to say, oh, these children are victims, you're killing children, you can't do that. What are they doing to provide a good life for this unwanted child that they know has a huge chance of becoming a criminal, that they know is going to be involved in a criminal justice system that's a huge chance of having a recycling door, right? A revolving door, that they're just literally perpetuating their own problem. And they're trying to make this emotionally charged argument that I think falls apart logically and philosophically if you actually look at what abortion, the abortion arguments are. Now, this isn't a conversation about abortion, and I don't want to devolve into that, but education is ultimately what we want to focus on, right? Education is the key to fixing a number of our problems, socially, globally, ethically, economically. Education. That's why I think we need to promote free education for everybody. I think a free college education should be standard in every country, in my opinion. So sex is an issue because I do support personal autonomy. I think it's extremely important. However, as somebody who has had sex with multiple partners, I understand that while sex does feel good, and I'm not going to sit here and gaslight the shit out of you and tell you that sex isn't really good and really fun, can't be anyway, right? I will tell you the truth that once I made love to my wife for the first time, I realized that sex is nothing compared to making love. And to make love to your partner, you have to have a bond, a true connection with somebody that goes beyond just the physical gratification of busting a nut, right? So if you think having sex feels good, you wait until you get an opportunity to make love to a partner, right? That's where it's really at. The thing we need to be aware of, and again, I'm not trying to vilify people who want to get their freak on. Okay, I'm not here to kink shame anybody. I'm not here to fucking preach at people about monogamy and anything else. Okay, you do what makes you happy. It's your life. But I want to encourage you to think about what sex really is. Okay, sex is a biological function of the body that we have evolved into, right? We evolved into being sexual creatures, and evolution has driven us to this for survival of the species, right? So because of this, there are physical things that are tied to sexual behavior. It's not just having children that are tied to this, right? But there are certain connections that we make with our sex partners. And the reason is because it turns out that raising our children also helps give us the best chance to surviving as a species. Providing what our children need is what's going to help our species thrive and flourish, right? The best way to provide our children what we need is to give them as much support as possible, which includes 2 parents in the home, a community of support, right? So emotionally, we have so many things that are biologically tied to the act of having sex that when you just have sex with people, you are really risking a lot of emotional attachments that you may not necessarily be ready for or may not be committed to, that you may not care about, but your partner might. So I really encourage people, if you're going to consider yourself to be an ethical or moral person, to communicate with people you're having sex with. If you're just going to have casual sex, be honest with yourself about what you're doing. Be honest with your partners about what you're engaging in, what your level of commitment is expected to be, what happens if things go sideways and you end up getting pregnant. Are you, using protection? If you have an STD, don't be fucking, giving that to somebody else, right? Take some responsibility. There's a lot of things that you need to consider with casual sex. And again, I'm not here to vilify sex, right? We all know sex feels good. I'm here to glorify making love and to say that that's where it's really at. And I'm here to tell you that you have a personal responsibility to be reasonable and realistic about what sex even is and what's actually attached to this. Okay. So I'll get off that now. What I will say about this whole topic is that statistically, it's undeniable, right? That economics plays a huge factor and education plays a huge factor in this revolving door of these prisons. It's undeniable that the prisons have a revolving door. So what we need to do is we need to step back from the situation, and we need to look at what we're trying to accomplish with these prisons in the first place. I already made the presentation at the beginning of this video. I'm not going to run you through all those talking points again at this point, 4 hours later. I really appreciate everybody who joined the panel today, because there was a lot of really great participation. A lot of topics did get brought up during the open panel that weren't necessarily related to the topic at hand, and that's perfectly fine. We need to maybe dig into those at a future date. And so maybe we'll have to review this at another time and get into it. I think I would like to thank everybody for watching. Thank everybody. If you want to like the video, thank you to all the subscribers for building this community. I can't believe we're coming up on 300 subscribers. That just, again, those numbers just blow me away. The views, 20,000 plus views. I really appreciate the support for this community. And it is a community. This isn't my channel. This is our channel. I'm doing the best I can to kind of manage this. But, you know, I take any constructive criticism or any advice. I appreciate the donations that have made this channel a lot better. We're going to see some outro videos, some outro graphics. Those were created and donated without me even asking, by people who watch the channel, like Deconverted Man, GeoSam. Thank you so much. Nicole, thank you for writing that great intro that I do every video. So for all of you who are supporting this effort, I just really appreciate it so much. And I look forward to seeing you next Sunday.
Channel. 3.30 through repeating, of course. That's better than I've done before. And Deacon Brendan, what do you do? Wait, objective ethics will be on your plate.